The meeting of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee is in session. It is Thursday, February 7th. We're at the Shepherd Hill Regional High School, and it is 7:02, and we will all stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under new business, FY 2020 budget, and Dr. Nash will start.
Thank you to the members this evening and those who are watching at home. Tonight is the second night that we have dedicated to the presentations of the FY20 budget, the preliminary budget that the directors and principals have worked on for a number of months to present to you. And this evening you'll hear from the secondary principals, the director of technology, and our STEAM and curriculum directors, respectively. So we'll start with both of the middle school principals. If you're in your budget book, it's tabs 9 and 10.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for an opportunity to speak of our fiscal 2020 budgets for Charlton Middle School. I'll do the honors and I'll start off, and we'll move forward from there. I'm happy to talk about our budget for next year. We'll be looking to open our doors with 94 anticipated staff members and a budget just a little bit north of $6 million to support the learning that's taking place at Charlton Middle School. As I break this down, or before I break it down, I do want to take a moment, excuse me, and I want to thank Dr. Nash, Mr. Matthew, Lorinda Allen, Karen Ayers, and Barbara Metarosian, just for their help in the preparation for all of this. There's so much work goes into a budget. Not only that, but I'd like to recognize my staff. The budget process for us starts when we start off the school year, when we take an inventory of the curriculum materials that we have at this point in time. And then we try to decide the basic and essential needs that we need to continue on to create a high-quality opportunity platform for all kids. So there's a lot that goes into it. So as I break out my budget for you today, I just want to make sure everybody's aware of exactly what we're doing. I've got 6 parts to it. We're going to start off inside the packet by looking at the overall listing of all of our staff members. You can see every staff member that we have within our building and their actual responsibilities within our building. And then I want to talk a little bit about class size. Our overall population for Charlton Middle School stayed pretty consistent. On October 1st, 2018, our enrollment was 681. As of February 1st, we had an additional 1 student added to our overall roster. So we did lose a few, gained a couple, but in the end, we stayed pretty consistent. Our class sizes stayed consistent as well at around 21.2 in all of the core classes. And it fluctuated, and our highest class size is 25, and that's our foreign language class. And I'll talk more about foreign language later on so you can see why those numbers are a little bit higher than the other classes. But if you look at our unified arts schedule, the average class there, the class size as well ranges from 18 to 19-ish in that ballpark. So again, optimum size, great for learning, great for student engagement. So as of February 1st, you can see those numbers just went to 682, so went up 1. Projections for next year, you'll see when we open our doors in August that our projected enrollment is 663, so we'll be down 19 students from our existing population at this point in time. Doesn't do a lot to our overall class size ratio, still stays at 20.7, still optimal number, when we're looking at impact on student learning.
Now, Dean,
Yes.
reading too, it says 25.
Yes, there's a reason for that, because the 2 reading teachers that we have get every student in the 5th and 6th grade. Okay, so it's not like a unified arts class, so that's why. And then the other classes will have pullouts and other things going on, and that's why the numbers are a little bit lower. Any other questions on the class size before I move on? Okay. For staffing requests for next year, I have 2 staffing requests that I want to bring to the committee's attention. The first, staying consistent with the strategic action plan, I'm proposing that we bring another full-time foreign language teacher into our school. This would give the opportunity for another 6 sections of foreign language, and as I see it, it would give an opportunity for equity for all 7th and 8th grade students to be immersed in some sort of language. Going back in time, I've been at Charlton Middle School for 15 years. I remember the time when we had 4 foreign language teachers, and each year, as things got tighter, we had to relinquish control of one here and one there. At this point in time, as we're looking to build a foundation for the high school, if we could provide that opportunity for all 7th grade and all 8th grade students to have this foreign language opportunity, it would be, I think it would be beneficial as they started looking at their core placements for the high school level.
So that'll be every seventh,
We-
regardless of their.
Yeah, if we got the teacher, we would be able to do it and schedule it, so we would have 6 sections in 7th grade and 6 sections in 8th grade.
What language do you have?
Well, it's Spanish at this point in time. We're looking to see what we could do, at the end of the day. There are multiple ways we could do this, and I think Principal Starczewski and I could talk about it. We have a different rollout model as it stands right now. In our building, we have 4 sections in 8th grade and 2 in 7th. And I do know at Dudley Middle School, they have 3 in 8th, 2 in 7th, and an introduction in 6th. So there's not a parity between the two schools, but I think if this comes to fruition, and even if it doesn't, we can look at what we're doing to try to mirror one another moving forward. But the more individuals that can have it, the better off it is. Right now, only the higher achieving students are getting it. So for example, the criteria for getting into foreign language is your ELA grade, your grade point average as well. That's 90% of the criteria. We use the ELA MCAS for 10%, and then we use a teacher recommendation for the break point. So if the teacher felt as though the child could handle the rigor, then we would do that.
So what are the lower, so for just the want of a term, what do they take instead of language?
So they have literacy in our
So
school.
they'll lose that,
That is,
this replace
we
literacy?
would lose that, but I don't think we could ever get every single student in there. There will be some students with needs, or they maybe opt out of the language, and if they do, we have a 40-minute block in place where those children could go, and they could be either, we could do reteaching like we do right now, or we share the curriculum, and it's that 40-minute literacy block that we've always had. So there's room for us to be creative with that, which is a good problem when you're looking at overall schedule.
Okay, thanks.
You're very welcome. The second staffing request that I'll bring to your attention is that presently, Mr. Starczewski and I share a librarian half the time. So the librarian will be at my school for 3 days, then pick up and leave and go to Dudley Middle School for 3 days. As you know, the library at Charlton Middle School is an active learning center. We have a program that takes place in there right now. Teachers use it all the time. We've got multiple dollars in resources with books and materials and computers in there. So having somebody in there is essential. Those 3 days when a librarian leaves us, I don't want to say it's a free-for-all, but we have to backfill it. We've got to make sure that people understand, what the requirements are. So there isn't somebody there to watch everything all the time. So we've done our best with what we have, and it's not optimal for the librarian who's there right now either, because she's picking up the pieces and going somewhere else, and there's nothing really steady about that. So I'm proposing that we put a new instructional aide in there. I can train the instructional aide to do what we need. And there's a method behind my madness with this as well, because as I talk a little bit about a reorg later on, you're going to see that having that person in that room, in that learning center, will be pivotal when I'm looking at overall supporting of learning of students who are in our ACES program right now. Okay? And I'll talk more about that in a minute when I talk about the reorg. But that body in the library, 5 days a week, it's essential. We just have a lot to protect in there.
I had a question, because we mentioned that at the budget meeting last week. What would it be better, I'm just throwing that out, that you split the librarian and the instructional assistant so each school has a certified librarian for half the week? Rather than you take the assistant and he takes the full, would it be better to half and half?
I don't want to speak to the district's needs, but I can tell you this. The responsibilities of what the library needs, I could probably train somebody to do that. And that's not to diminish the requirements of what a certified librarian has at this point in time. As we're morphing and moving forward and we're becoming a learning center, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the district only needs one librarian, one certified librarian in a district. And then we could actually use almost anybody to fill that void. And that's at a lesser of a cost as well, if we look at it this way too, because they'll be able to hopefully use that person to support student learning, not just librarian. And we use our librarian now for exploratory class. So we're backfilling bits and pieces.
I'm just
utilize it.
concerned that the Charlton Middle School parents might say, how come we don't have a certified librarian and Dudley has it full-time? I'm just throwing that out there.
Sure, I can see what you're saying with that. I mean, I'd have to, look into it and do some research and talk, but the idea is, that, the money's attached to a new librarian, a certified librarian will be in addition to what we have right now when we're requesting for an instructional aid. It'll be much more.
No, I meant that split the one librarian like you do, and the days
Yeah.
when she goes to Dudley, your instructional assistant would take that place, and then the days when Charlton, is it better to have one person there permanently?
Okay.
You know, so you wouldn't hire a new
So
librarian.
the certified will be there half the time.
Right,
like
like
now.
now, but then the other days would be filled by the assistant. I'm just throwing that
Yeah.
out there, because people might say, why is it, you don't have the certified one and the other one does? You know, I don't know.
Yeah, now I see, yeah.
I don't know if scheduling would be easier. It's easier if you just have one person all week.
Well, the one person, the stability of having
Right.
one person there makes a huge difference.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm
So,
just-
but that's not something that's off the table. I mean, that's definitely, we can
I'm just
explore
saying,
that
because it's the
option.
same amount of money, regardless how you split the schedule. You
Yeah.
can work that out between the two of you. You know,
Definitely something we can
Yeah,
think of,
okay.
if that's the way the committee would like to
Right.
move forward with it, sure. Yeah, but it's just essential that we both have somebody for
Right.
5 days, if at all possible. On the next section, I have my staff reorganization. I'm presenting to the committee tonight to relinquish 2 gen ed instructional assistants for 1 special education teacher. Rationale behind why I'm doing that: this year, we started an inclusive practice in the 8th grade. We've been able to push in all of our 8th grade students, and it's been a very welcomed opportunity for, number one, my staff, as they're learning how the co-teaching model works, but more importantly, for the overall learning of individual students who are now immersed within their peers. We have constant connection with how they're doing. They're enjoying the opportunity to learn. They are flourishing. It's just a unique opportunity, and we're really gaining some traction. So our whole 8th grade has push-in services at this point in time. Now, as we do that, we look at contractual language, and as we start looking for scheduling for teachers the following year, we can only schedule teachers for 4 blocks, 4 60-minute blocks, and then 1 40-minute block. By doing that, and if we focus on the push-in inclusive model for ELA and math, that will take up the 4 60s for a special education teacher. And then we got to be mindful of the service delivery grid, and if there are reading goals on that service delivery grid, we have to provide services for the children, the students in that capacity. So this extra special ed teacher will be able to backfill and fill in for any type of opportunities for those reading goals that are set forth. But more importantly, if we need to backfill in any grade level and fill any other course. The utopian model would be to be able to have the special education teacher in all 4 core content areas: science, social studies, math, and ELA. But as we start off this whole process, it's good to go slowly and build upon it as we go. I'm also have to be mindful of the fact of our sub-separates that we have in our school and what that looks like as we provide equity for all students to a content-based teacher. So we'll be preparing that platform and looking at it and working closely with the special ed director of the district to ensure that we make that happen. And this extra body will allow us the latitude to be able to backfill where we need to and make sure the support is there for all kids. My other, my other reorganization, that opportunity that I'm bringing to you is I'm asking the committee to consider allowing me to relinquish my ACES teacher and move that position and the monies associated with that position into a computer application teacher. As some of you guys will know, Angie Dwyer retired about 4 years ago. We did not rehire in that position. We've been cutting those unified arts classes down. We currently have 11 unified arts teachers, which causes a backlog in my scheduling of 18 exploratories. So if we can move the ACES teacher to a computer application, we can create a computer generated class that's going to take care of all 5th and 6th graders. They'll learn application. They'll be able to take the platform of Google Suite, do all the things and learn the essentials on how they're supposed to roll out for digital learning and backing everything up here. So it'd be a very good opportunity for us. Coupling that with Project Lead the Way would have a really good platform for all kids. At the same time, you might be saying, well, what are you going to do with those kids? So that's Plan B. So I am looking at restructuring what our guidance counselors do at this point in time. So we would have our guidance counselors teaching exploratory classes, and to me, it didn't make a lot of sense. I would rather have them working with the at-risk kids in the library, in the learning center, with the instructional aid, having a team around kids who need support. So we have a centered area where all kids could go at any time when things weren't working well for them. And it doesn't cost the district any more money to do that. So it's just restructuring our resources that we have right now to meet the needs of the kids. So this also would give us the 12 unified arts teachers back, which allows me to have a smooth schedule, no bumps in the road. I don't have to worry about exploratory classes and defining what's going to happen there. And it just fulfills our overall schedule perfectly.
Now, how did that ACES program work? These kids were in a classroom all day?
Yeah, so what would happen was we would identify children. So at the start of the year, we'd have just a pocket of kids who would go that we pre-identified as children at risk. So presently, our ACES teaches services about 62 children. And
He would be teaching everything to them.
he would be not so much teaching, reinforcing the learning that was going on.
Okay.
So it's not
Regular
special,
Right,
it's
no,
regular
I
ed.
know it.
So it's an area for respite. If we have kids who had concussions and they need to go somewhere to slow down the pace of the learning, we would send them there. If we have children who are struggling, or, it could be social emotional.
But
it
they'd
could-
still be in a regular classroom? They'd be
Absolutely. It's a
coming in.
40-minute block.
Oh, okay.
Every day built into their schedule. So it would work just like the Unified Arts schedule on a 2-day cycle, but you can do it for 6 days if you wanted to. So he does service a lot of kids, but I believe that our guidance counselors could do exactly the same thing and have a better
Right.
impact, because we want them to see those kids every single day and be proactive. So for us, it's a win-win, and there's no cost
So
associated
it's
with it.
basically the same schedule, just a different person.
That is absolutely
Okay.
correct,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
But these are the children that are, some of these children need this program to stay grounded or to stay able to stay in the mainstream classroom all the time, or maybe that's the general ed, I don't know what we
Right.
call it, sorry. But if you're taking them and putting them into an open setting like this, is there a possibility that we're disrupting the way that they have been able to associate learning?
Mrs. Terry, right now it's already set up in our library. So when you're in our library and you look, there's a back corner that's kind of cordoned off. You can't even see what's really there. But we use the librarian when she's there. We use the Mr. Rice, who's our ACES teacher, and then we'll send in guidance teachers to help out. So it's a community supporting the learners. The teacher of record holds a history certification at this point in time, and he is backfilling and helping kids with homework. He's making sure that kids stay on top of things. He's communicating with parents. And those kids, there's an entrance criteria and an exit criteria. We don't say that you're going to be in that program. I don't want you in there the whole year. Quite frankly, we want to build the skills so they become resilient enough to work through the adversity. This is the
Okay.
middle levels. And then we want them out. We want that to be a fluid program.
Okay.
And with counseling, they can do that with the counselors there. So again, it's just taking the resources we have and shifting them over. And with the computer-based testing with MCAS, there is no better or greater need than to have some real understanding of how to do the computer application, and get that out across all curriculum areas too, and have that computer teaching working.
The new computer is 5th and 6th. Are the 7th and 8th already getting computer
So
services?
8th grade and 5th grade, we're getting it right now. We have Project Lead the Way now in 6, 7, it's going to be in 8 next year. So it's all intertwined with one another. So when we start looking at what's good for kids and natural progression of that, 5th and 6th is the area we want to really catch them. So, and then we're going to sit down as a group and we're going to see, okay, what has the best meaning, or the best impact for student learning as we move forward. So that new teacher would have to be looking at 2 grade levels. So I'm already having conversations with our existing computer teacher about, what this looks like.
Eli?
Through the chair, how does this impact the guidance counselor's current schedule, though, if you're not
So-
replacing them?
Yep, that's a great question. So the guidance counselors now have a very open schedule. So they have their schedule where they see their kids, but they have fluidity. There's nothing that is set with them. They keep their anecdotal notes of who they see and when they see them. And there's always 2. So what happens is we bounce them off of one another. We loop our counselors. So from that perspective, I have right now 5th and 7th grade is Erica Dragon, and 6th and 8th grade is Mike Daly. And they take the kids through the 4 years, so they develop those relationships. And then they'll be working with them directly within the library setting. The volume, if they stay on top of things, isn't that bad. They can handle it. And they have Mr. Olson and myself. So we got like 5 people who will be working in that learning center all the time. So it would not exclude them from, if there's a crisis, something social emotional pops up, they'll still be able to do their job. Yes.
Can I ask a question about the
Sure.
counselors? Being a middle school counselor at one point, do your counselors do any kind of push-in with any, like, training or educational kind of training to the kids?
Give me an example of
Like,
what you're looking for.
we had, like, when I did it, I taught a curriculum to the kids. Like,
Yep.
that I would have all the 6th grade kids come in, and I would do a study skills session
Yep.
with every single class.
So,
kids.
so currently, our counselors are responsible for bringing in individuals to do, for assemblies, to talk to kids and things of that nature. The actual push in within classes, they've worked within the health classes before. They've worked, they'll go out and they'll work with Mr. Rice at this point in time with the at-risk kids, but nothing in a real push-in service, no.
Okay.
Yes.
Another follow-up question.
Sure.
I'm trying to understand how the ACES program is more than just a place. So how are we creating what is needed or necessary for that particular student to have a skill set to move back? So
Yep.
I'm trying to understand beyond a place for someone to have regulation.
Okay.
Okay, so if you can help me with,
Sure.
help me with that.
So students, once they are, we have a progress monitoring system within our school. We monitor kids, and when the grades drop below a certain area, or when a teacher recommends that a child's not making a grade, we then go to guidance with their name. We sit down at a table, and then we talk about the child. Once we identify the child as a child who would benefit from that 40-minute block in their class, we then change their schedule and put them in. So they could have been in the Unified Arts class, they could have been anywhere at that point in time. Then we make a determination of whether they're going to be in for 2 days, 4 days, or 6 days, based on the interventions that are needed. So once we see that a child has regained the skill sets needed within that class, and the grades get back up over 70, 75, and they're doing their work and things are back to normal, we can take them out. Some kids do benefit from being in there all the time. It's just who they are. But the majority of them understand that when they go in, it's not a place where they're going to be there forever.
Now, Dean, how many classes, I know they're not really classes, but in the library, how many 40-minute slots are there? Are they there?
He has one
Are
for
like-
each grade level, so he'll have 4 40-minute blocks in there. And then we have 2 grade levels that he has double up, and it's going to be 7th and
Yeah.
it's going to be 8th. So he has 6 total.
But
Like
you
any
have
teacher.
enough, like, isn't that going to keep the guidance counselors in the library all day? If you've got all these slots?
Well, it'd be a 40-minute block, so each counselor would do 2 sections. So you'd only be looking at 80 minutes during the day, what they do with kids. But now if the instructional aide is in there, they become part of that learning team as well. And again, we don't start the year off with that. We get through that first quarter, and if there's a real need to start the year, we might put 1 or 2 in there. So there's a revolving opportunity for people to work with the individuals. But there has to be a teacher of record.
Right.
So that teacher of record would be the guidance counselor or whomever. The certification does not have to be direct. It can be any certification to work
Right,
with that
right.
child. So we've had it for years, and it's worked. It's it's that catch-all, and all of a sudden when somebody needs something, we see a family come in that's in crisis, and we know we want this child in school, we don't want to send them home. We're going to put them in a safe place where he or she could do their work. And, there's an unpredictable amount of times when you just don't know who's coming through your door on a particular day and what they're dealing with. So that having that place to go is vitally important. So I'm not saying to get rid of the program. The program is going to stay intact. We're just going to reorganize how we're going to support it. And I feel very comfortable that it can be done without any additional cost to the district.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Do you also feel very comfortable that it can be done with more benefit than negative for the students?
I do. We have a first-year teacher in there right now who didn't know a thing about teaching, and we've worked with him. We're the ones who help support him to help the kids. So, and we're talking about 2 professional people in guidance who've been in there for a long time. I'm not worried at all about their abilities to be able to connect with kids or help them do homework or help them write plans to get back into class and set goals for themselves. That's fundamental in what we do in education. So, again, we're not reteaching. We're recalibrating minds and helping kids feel comfortable with who they are.
I've heard many good success stories about it, so I would hate
Oh,
for it
thank
to
you.
be a negative,
Yep.
the way that you're changing things.
Yeah, I don't want it to be simple. I'm reorganizing. I'm just shifting. I'm keeping the program intact the way that it is. I would never want to lose that.
Okay.
But I like the idea of the one person in charge of the ACES, the teacher there, that you're trading in now for the computers application.
I think a guidance person makes a lot of sense because they're more geared to that kind of
It's a
kid.
social emotional
Yeah,
connection.
rather than who cares, no, I'm not saying who cares, but the math and science is secondary to actually his mental health.
Sure.
So I think it's a good idea to try the guidance person.
And I've spoken to both educators, and they're both very happy to try it. They would rather not be teaching exploratories. I mean, you know, at
Oh,
the end of
that's
the day.
instead,
you know,
right, so
You
they're
know,
not
that's-
taking up
That's
their
the
time
trade-off. They would
with
rather
other
work directly
kids.
with the kids that
Right.
they service as
Oh,
they loop.
good.
They're not working with anybody differently.
Right.
They form relationship with these families for 4 years. They know the
So
the
they
kids and the families
do,
better than anybody.
instead of their exploratory, so they will have time.
They will have time, yes. And the guidance counselors throughout the district, even at Dudley Middle School, still do exploratories and do other things. So we all have to backfill because of our scheduling
Right.
issue. So that's what happens when our staff gets,
So
we don't
that's-
have enough staff. Okay. Any other questions on those two? Turning to my technology hardware requests, you're going to see that I have one. I need a smart board that's fading. All of my teachers have the luxury of having smart boards in their room. We started 6 or 7 years ago. Our PTO has been nothing but very, very helpful for us. They've helped us find where we needed to get to. I think I have, my original request, I think I wanted like 5 more smart boards, and those were just for UA teachers and reading teachers who didn't have them, but all core teachers have the essentials that they need in the classroom right now. So just looking for that one smart board to replace the one that's beginning to show dots, the way the teacher has presented it to me. For my building improvement requests, the roof. It's not in a good place. The last rainstorm we had 84 leaks throughout the building. We had multiple buckets. I think I must have called Mr. Matthew about 15 times. It sent pictures. It's tough. It's tough. The building is 19 years old. We're coming to the end. I think the membrane that's left on the roof is just about gone. And we can never pinpoint exactly where those leaks are, and we're allocating funding to try to stop the leaks right now. It's a Band-Aid approach. We're doing the best we can, but it's not a good situation. And I wouldn't be truthful if I wasn't saying that to you at this point in time. We pray for sunshine every day, but the sunshine then helps melt away the membrane. So we're losing anyway. Mother Nature, it's the elements. It's getting older. It's getting older. So there's a big cost associated with that. I know Mr. Matthew can speak to what's going to be coming down the road, hopefully, to make that happen. But for now, I'm just looking for some money to be able to try to patch. I hate throwing money into the wind, but we have to attempt. The second part on there, I have my air conditioning unit in the library. We do need to get that fixed with a $15,000 price tag on that. I'm hoping we can get that done. As well as the last one in our IDF room. It's a climate-controlled room that takes care of, makes sure the switches have longevity. So we have the 7th and 8th grade wing done at this point in time. We need to do the one on the 5th and 6th grade wing to preserve that technology equipment that we have. And that's at the tune of $7,000 for that climate control.
Those are not listed under 2019. Does that mean we're not funding them at this proposed?
The thought is that we'll be able to do it this year.
What about the restroom stall dividers that are not listed that, I mean, are we gonna try to
Those
find a
those are
different funding source?
every day, those are items that we can just take care of right now. Those are listed down on the immediate needs that we had. So those have been fixed.
Okay.
In the last section are the line item breakdown of all the individual money allotments for our school. In lieu of going through each one of them, Mr. Matthew has shifted our accounts to where we need to make sure that we can get funding for our software that we need, IXL and STAR testing, and any other program needs that we have as well. It's all listed down there. Any questions?
Any questions?
Through the chair, I've got a couple questions.
Sure.
So on your summary, under other expenses, the increase in instructional equipment and technology, just to clarify with the confusion with the technology piece, is the money for software in the school's budget or in the technology budget?
Each school has its own budget for software. The presentation and the unified approach is through the technology department,
Okay.
but you'll see a line item in each
Okay, so
area for software.
Well, my question was instructional equipment and technology has quite a large bump. Is that related to software?
The instructional software line item there was a bump of $11,492, which would be consistent with the cost for IXL, which is just shy of $7,000.
Okay.
And STAR testing for our building with our students was $9,632 for the
Okay.
upcoming year. So that will take care of funding both of those.
Okay. A question on the out-of-district tuition and this is just a general question because it's the first one that we're looking at. So students that are out of district tuition, that gets back billed to what would be typically their home school.
In this particular case, for both Dudley Middle School and Charlton Middle School, we put a placeholder in for any regular ed, gen ed student that may need to go out.
Okay.
That's why it's
So it's not a
for
special ed
RISE.
necessarily, okay. all
It's
right.
not, it has nothing to do with special education.
Okay, all right. And then, just a question, and I know that you answered it related to your 2 full-time reading and teachers,
Yep,
or 5th and 6th grade.
yep.
Reading is not necessarily reading, is it more of a
It's
literacy class?
literacy. It would be more considered literacy. In our literacy class at this point in time, we have a divide. So 3 days would be allocated towards enrichment and for ELA comprehension skill sets, skill building, and then 3 days is math literacy.
Okay.
So they vacillate back and forth based on the needs. So they have all the needs. We take our STAR testing data and we take that and we break it down and we have the kids all with a grid on where they're deficient.
Okay.
And that's where they'll use their IXL. That's where they will use all the areas and all the skill-based development things to happen. So they plan with the grade level teachers and they backfill.
And just my final question, and you might have answered it and I missed the explanation. So you're doing computer skills currently in 8th grade, but based on your proposal here, you're putting the computer skills into grade 5.
We have currently grade 5 and grade 8 with computer skills.
Okay.
Okay, so what we're looking to do right now is we're trying to build a 5-6 opportunity to put a whole computer application curriculum in place for them that encompasses the digital learning that's needed for the kids to have the successful tools at this point in time. So as Project Lead the Way starts to take off and be part of our overall curriculum as well, I'm going to be able to take that other teacher and kind of mix them in with the schedules to make sure all the kids can get what they need.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, just a question, do you have Title I in your school?
We do not.
Okay.
We don't have that service.
I didn't think so.
No.
So thanks again, and the same sentiments that Dean sent around to the entire administrative team and certainly the district office team for all the support through this process. We had some real high-level conversations, and we retreated to the balcony often to take a look at what was going on the dance floor. First and foremost, the Dudley Middle School faculty and staff are the core of our work with the kids, and certainly with their day-to-day efforts and the special pieces about Dudley Middle School that they put out front makes us certainly unique. Tonight all the 5th grade staff, including the instructional assistants, right on through a number of student volunteers, we're having a pasta dinner for families to serve as a grade level fundraiser. And I attended the first set seating, and there were about 110 people. The second seating was, I think, close to 200 people that started at 6 o'clock tonight. So it was a really nice example of some community events, and you'll actually be seeing that when we do our student visit to school committee in March. We'll be celebrating some of the civic-minded and the community service-related activities that the students have engaged in this year. So it's a special place, much like Charlton Middle, based on the quality staff we have. We do have 61.4 FTEs currently going into this discussion tonight. On the staff listing in Section 3, professional staff, the ACES staff member, Misa Fossis, is actually not listed on here. So I just noticed that, my apologies. So with his addition of 1.0 FTE, the total is 61.4, if you're adding up and keeping track instead of 60.4. Enrollment for next year is slated to be relatively stable. Currently, we're at 557 students as of February 1, which is the exact same number that we had on October 1. We had several move-outs and several move-ins. For purposes of this presentation, it was perfect, which for next school year, we're projected to, based on current enrollment, we're slated to have 546 students, was a decrease of 11 students overall. On the class projections for 19 to 20, that's based on February 1 enrollment, we have two two projections. One is with additional staff requests that I'll be explaining later on in this presentation. With the increase of a world language teacher, we will hopefully be able to double the number of students who are in foreign language with our current model. And with the increase of a phys ed / health teacher, kind of position to be determined, I'll explain that later, we would move from 26 exploratory, 26 unified arts sections, distributing the kids down to 24, which would allow us to have equity grades 5 through 8. We currently run 2 separate unified arts schedules in our building. One is a 2-day, 2-day, 2-day model where the kids will have one unified arts experience for 2 days, a second unified arts experience for 2 days, and then an exploratory kind of stopgap in their schedule for 2 days. That's in 7th and 8th grade. In 5th and 6th grade, we run a 3-day model. Students will have UA number 1 for 3 days, and then UA number 2 for 3 days. The reason that we're running that model, it stems back several years, was primarily because of a reduction in staff. We could make a schedule change and go to a full building 2-2-2 model. However, that will double the number of exploratory classes that we have, thereby increasing the need and reliance on our core content teachers to either pick up additional exploratory classes or have unified arts teachers picking up additional sections beyond their day-to-day capacity. It's not possible. We could try it, but it won't work. Going to a 3-3 model across the building right now with our staffing just would have class sizes in the low 30s, which is not good for anyone. So we have the split model. So when I talk about the additional requests later on, it's directly related to our scheduling model in that phys ed position. There is a class projection based on the current staffing model where we would run still 26 sections in the unified arts. Class sizes at Dudley Middle School are right in the wheelhouse with perfect recommendations from National Middle School Councils, educators. I mean, right at that 20 to 22 is the sweet spot. Anything lower is challenging. Anything 24, 25 is considered high and cringeworthy, Mrs. Carmignani. Any questions on class size and sections? Moving on to the staffing requests, much like Mr. Packard described about the foreign language request, looking for 1.0 FTE, language to be determined, but the bottom line is we want to increase access to our students. We currently have 87 seats that we're utilizing for Rosetta Stone to fill student schedules in their exploratory block, and that is really because we can't get those kiddos into a foreign language class. We only have one teacher. So those 87 students would immediately be able to be picked into a foreign language section, taught by a teacher. Mr. Packard described earlier kind of the entrance criteria based on English language arts performance, teacher recommendation, and MCAS. We run that same criteria. It's not a perfect criteria, but it is the most equitable solution we could come up with. We do make exceptions. If a student comes from a family who, are Spanish speakers and they're fluent, we're okay with moving kids in. And our Spanish teacher would rather have classes of 35 or 40, but we don't allow her to. But she would. The phys ed and health, or phys ed / health position would allow us to get back to an equitable scheduling model across our building. It would also allow us to pull 2 core content teachers out of teaching health, which is a block in their schedule in place of their team's exploratory, where they are not able to provide intervention and supports to kids because they're teaching health. They're both certified health educators, but they can't get access to their kids for content. We also have additional teachers teaching phys ed sections. Unified arts teachers and our ACES teacher teach one section of phys ed. One of those teachers is is a Project Lead the Way teacher, and with the introduction of 8th grade Project Lead the Way, I need that teacher to not teach phys ed and teach Project Lead the Way, which will put a burden on another member of the team to teach a phys ed class. So the trickle down of the staffing model that we have is starting to become more burdensome given the programming that we're bringing in, which is in the best interest of kids.
I just asked back on the foreign language, and those 87 kids that take Rosetta Stone, will you replace it with some other new, if we get another teacher, will you still use a Rosetta Stone with some other kids? Or how?
We're not looking at Rosetta Stone moving forward. We're looking at a program that will be less cost burdensome to the district. We have some free access to programs such as Duolingo, which is actually recommended by our foreign language teacher as a practice model. And the thought would be that students who aren't in foreign language and aren't in reading, because that's basically the two populations, we have that third population of kids who are back on team in that exploratory class, that 6-day exploratory. Some of those students are receiving intervention in math, intervention in English language arts, science, or social studies. Some are engaging in Genius Hour projects or community service learning. Still others are looking for something to do, such as, let's go ahead and introduce a foreign language class. That class is also where we run DARE in the 6th grade. So students go through with Sergeant Poplowski, who provides the DARE instruction. When we talk about the reorg in a couple of moments, with the foreign language teacher, with the instructional librarian, we'll be able to introduce research on a rotating basis to students in that exploratory model, so teams can go down and access that with the librarian providing instruction. So we have a lot of potential with the additional staff in this reorg, but it does kind of all come together.
So you're discontinuing Rosetta Stone? Are you moving forward to cancel that out?
The contract is up this year from what I understand, and in order to renew it and have a high enough usage to justify the number of seats, we don't have that as a district.
You don't have that?
No. I don't know how many Mr. Packett has at Charlton Middle. We have 87 seats currently in use.
As a district, as we had discussion and evaluated usage, it didn't make sense to continue because our usage was not where had hoped it would be. It's not a substitute for foreign language. It augments it, and it doesn't provide the opportunity for the natural progression. When you can introduce foreign language at 7 and 8, by that time the student moves to high school, you've now ratcheted up the program that you can offer at a high school because they've completed the first level. So there's the potential opportunity for them to take 2 languages at a high school. So it's not, when you add it here, the impact is what happens at the high school. When you don't add it, then that also has an impact. So I think there are better ways for us to look at, and you'll see some of the software requests, the newer ones are really going to replace some of that. But the usage of a Rosetta Stone and the cost to the district, the economy of scale just didn't make sense for us to continue as a district.
So now every 7th and 8th grade, like in Charlton, every 7th and 8th grade student will take foreign language if you get the new teacher?
I have not had that level of discussion right
Okay.
now. Currently, we have that one section of 6th grade students, 2 sections of 7th, and 3 sections of 8th with our current teacher. And that was really based off of her driving, let's get foreign language in at a younger age. I can tell you that we would probably have a little bit more flexibility at Dudley Middle, given the size of our population and the number of FTEs that we would have. So we could probably still drop down to 6th grade. But at Charlton, with significantly more kids, it would be very difficult to have parity there. But it is something that we really need to discuss at the district level. And we can come back with thoughts as the year progresses. Staffing reorg. Mr. Packard described the model perfectly. The only addition that I would have about having that full-time person at Dudley Middle would be to allow us to effectively provide students additional experiences and research skills in library science activities, teaching from 5th grade how to vet Google searches, up through 8th grade with proper MLA citations at a high level and incorporate that in with the research papers that they're writing, where sometimes the English teachers, when they get to the library, it's difficult to teach those skills while doing the research, and having the librarian to be able to do that as a course in exploratory would be a helpful model for us. But the bigger idea, as Mr. Packard really stated, nail on the head, was having full-time coverage. Right now, the 3 days on, 3 days off is certainly a challenge, and I'm interested in further conversation about the idea of the instructional assistant. But I'm game.
Through the chair, is there parity in your exploratories? Because you're talking about an exploratory of research, which I think is very valuable as a skill set, developing that before kids are moving on to high school. Is there an equivalent at CMS
No.
in that?
No,
Okay.
we have fewer exploratory classes than Dudley Middle School based on staffing and based on
Okay.
sections. And if I move my ACES program, I'm not gonna have any exploratories. So I had 18 sections that I was backfilling at this point in time due to a reduction, not the reduction, but retirements.
Okay.
So that left me with 18 open holes to fill in my schedule. So they end up getting taken as an exploratory by a teacher to fill those sections.
But just to clarify, though, you're talking about the unified arts exploratory, those gaps in there, or the everyday 6-day exploratory?
Point of emphasis, you're absolutely right, because we changed the wording from literacy in 7th and 8th grade to exploratory. So those in 7th and 8th grade, the 40-minute block right now is also considered exploratory, but that meets for 6 days. That wording used to be called literacy. Okay, we made that switch last year through the school committee. And just to change, so we had adequate wording to meet the contract, so we could have, everything would be smooth. So, for example, we have 12 sections of exploratories in each grade, because those are the three sets of teachers that have the 40-minute block. The team leader doesn't have a 40-minute block. So that would be the same consistent for 7th and 8th grade. So those, we would have parity there at this point in time.
I'm gonna wanna wrap back, because I'm a little confused, and I don't wanna go, but maybe we can talk about that. It's really more the conversation around the equal offering of what students are getting across. So that particular topic of research, I want to see how those things blend across both, because they're curriculum related.
And they do that within their exploratories now. They can
Right.
actually go down and they can explore how to do the research, and they work with the librarian. So that is happening, if that helps with the answer of the question. But correct, it could be through whatever curriculum that they're in. It could be
Right.
through science, it could be through ELA, it could be through math.
Sure. I just that it kind of emphasizes the difference between having a certified librarian at Dudley Middle School and having an instructional assistant at CMS, and that's to the point that Mrs. Kabala was making.
Yep.
So if you're looking at doing research, having a librarian teach you research is, I think, bringing you to a different level than an instructional assistant teaching you research. And that's where,
The other
yeah, I'm
major
looking at that.
difference is when you have a full-time certified teacher, i.e. the library or media specialist, I think you can assign classes. So in other words, whether it's a research class, techniques, you pull that out of the teacher. Now, you really can't do that. You don't have the capacity, because having them on a part-time basis pulls away from the ability to actually assign them a period of instruction. What it looks like, introduction to research in grade 5, many of them are skilled in, they are your computer technology teachers. Remember, they're library media specialists, so in some districts, they are your computer teachers. At elementary levels, they service that same way. So we don't have that, because right now, you've got that difference, but you've got to look at it from a K-12 perspective. Think about what we just were talking about last night, looking to reinstate that. If we really want to focus, we need to have people in our libraries for kids to be able to read early on. That's why and then look at what happens at the middle school and the high school. The one place you need to have a certified media librarian specialist is at the high school due to the NEASC accreditation. But anywhere else, you really don't need it. Should you have it? Of course, and there's a reason why. but you want to make sure you utilize them in a capacity to use their skill set to do some of the things that I think we're talking about.
Just to wrap everything together in terms of the staffing, the reason I use that research as an example, because it's a high-level experience for meaning in the exploratory. That exploratory is not a study hall. But what that does, it allows our team teachers, if we can create a rotation through, an experience in the library, and again, this is just an example of what we can do at the time, it allows the teachers on team to access the students who are struggling learners or who really want to extend their learning in a certain content area. And we can create that rotation like we do with DARE or like we do with Career in College with the guidance counselors during those exploratory times. It creates a lot more flexibility in our schedule by allowing us one more professional staff member to interact with the kids in an instructional basis, which is ultimately the best thing to do for kids down the road. The final part of the reorg is related, as we heard last night with our elementary colleagues and Mr. Packard, the reorganization of our special ed model via adding one additional special educator to the building that position would allow us to get to a more inclusive model than we currently have now in terms of co-teaching. We are co-teaching in multiple grades. We have made some significant progress in the 8th grade this year with moving students into a co-taught model. Based on academic need, not all 8th grade students receiving special ed services are in the co-taught setting. So we will remain with some level of small group instruction for ELA and math. But the restrictions we have with the staffing, that additional special educator will go a long way to allowing for high-level co-teaching in math and ELA, potentially in science and social studies in sporadic bursts, but certainly math and ELA. And it will allow us to ratchet up our support of our most at-risk population, our students with disabilities. And the use of the IA positions to do so does it in a budget-neutral way, relatively budget-neutral way, not perfectly budget-neutral.
What grade are you targeting for co-teaching with this?
The focus would be directly in 7th and 8th, and that really depends on the current grid services once we end up in May. I believe, based on the numbers, we'll be looking at 7th and 8th grade.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I have a question,
Go
not
ahead.
necessarily for Chris, but a couple things on the co-teaching PD. Like, have we set aside funds for PD?
You'll be hearing that from Curriculum and Professional Development.
Okay,
Yes.
good, thank you, because that would need to be essential.
Yes.
And then I'm also, as the newbie, still trying to figure
Oh,
out.
What am I pointing? I'm sorry, I'm pointing in the wrong direction. Sorry.
I'm still trying to figure out all the programs that you offer and how everything's intertwined at your level and at the high school level. Do you have a program of studies available?
The middle school does not have a
No.
program of studies.
Okay. Okay,
The high school does.
the high school level. Okay.
Transparency is very important, though, and we are looking at creating something where parents can have a true understanding of what the flow chart looks like from 5th to 8th grade going into high school. It is.
Middle school scheduling is pretty confusing.
It is.
A lot of what has dictated and happened is that because over the years, reductions in staff have created the inability to run some things the way you would want to. This is what happens. And also, I would say, though, there's certainly these principals know better than I, but the middle school philosophy around educating students is to give them, really a generalist kind of, a little bit of everything to kind of see how that kind of fits and where they're going to go. There is some belief that, similar to what we do when we go off to college, we become majors usually in our junior and senior year when we're taking all of those courses in science or math or English. There is some sense that maybe we should revisit that model, and not just at middle schools, but at all levels. But
And thank you for the resources that you have. You do an excellent job at the middle schools. Thank you.
Thanks.
You have the most important job because the MCAS, there's most testing in the middle schools. So that's tough.
We're looking forward to the entire month of.
The entire month, right.
Sorry, 2 months of testing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
You didn't go through
I still
building.
have a few
You
things.
didn't go through building.
I'd be happy to just say it's all in there, find it.
Please
Find it,
proceed.
we can do it on our own.
Did you have another question, Mrs. Cummings, or Ms. Terry?
I didn't know if we were gonna talk about this, so I was just gonna tell you that I appreciated in your capital plan, I'll call it our capital building plan, that you noted what was done during 2018, 2019. I think that's a valid thing to put into this, because otherwise, we've said the needs, but maybe haven't documented the things that have been able to be accomplished.
Thanks, Mr. Matthew, for tracking that. That's I can't, technology, Mr. D'Angelo will talk about some of the expected, needs that we have, as a district at this time. The request for Dudley Middle School, we're stable. There are some low-level needs that were foregone in terms of technology, for the fiscal 20. And there were some high-level wants that were taken off of that list. But, it's nothing that's going to set us back at this time, which is an okay thing. In terms of the capital, we're excluding the roof conversation. We've got an estimated, 660,000 plus in the queue of projects that need to be done, we would like to be done, and would be wonderful if we could get some done. The wonderfuls are the really nice to have, the bells and the whistles. We need to really plan for, within the next couple of years, there are going to be some real priorities, such as boiler sections that we're going to need, and it's going to be a large hit. Obviously, the roof conversation. Many of the projects themselves are just wear and tear. The carpeting on the floors, original to the building. You get 600 kids tromping over them every day, and the like. But all in all, the building is in great shape. Our lead, Mr. Andre, and his team take great care of the building, and it's a fantastic piece. We're only looking for two projects in fiscal 20 related to the direct capital plan. If we have additional monies, that we find, we can do some of the smaller projects potentially. The first is the additional security cameras, exterior and interior, at an approximate cost of $13.5, and then I can't remember what we called it, for an oil tank monitor, to go ahead and communicate with our energy management system, which we kind of need there. So it's relatively small dollars in the capital for Dudley Middle School for FY20.
How about the recarpeting of school's second floor? That's just $4,000. Does it need it right away? Or I know it's not listed for 2020, but.
Yeah, not for 2020. I think, I can't actually speak to why the number is lower. I remember a conversation with Mr. Andre, but I can circle back to you.
Yeah, but I mean, is there a need for it in 2020? I mean, is it all worn out, or?
No, we have some classrooms that have some torn carpet that's been just over the years after a desk has gotten dragged over it, but that's
Right.
been temporarily repaired.
Repaired.
And the like, so it's more, I believe it's more spot repair on the second floor than it would be for everywhere, but it's not an immediate need. And when you look at our building compared to other buildings with carpet, you would be impressed, even though our carpet's old.
Can you give me a little info on your screens for the windows?
The screens for the windows, we don't have screens for the windows.
Do you have screens on you have a second floor, right?
Yes.
Do you have screens on the second floor?
No.
Isn't it code?
No.
No. The windows don't open fully. They're the latch handle
right.
pull back,
Got it.
8-inch gap at the top. It's more the screens for the dramatic middle school response to the WASP.
The WASP.
Yes.
Good mistake, but-
Sorry. Moving into the line items, there are a couple of lines that increase significantly, particularly in instructional equipment and technology and guidance and psych. The reason for those increases, first and foremost, Renaissance Learning, our STAR benchmark testing product, is not being covered by grant funding, so the schools are absorbing that cost into the budget. And IXL, which is a tool for English language arts and mathematics, as Mr. Pack had mentioned. Additional information about technology, software, and the like is inside Mr. D'Angelo's presentation. But outside of that, unless anybody has specific questions about any increases, I believe you've got a pretty good picture about Dudley Middle School.
Through the chair, guidance and psychological
Yes.
increase.
Yep. We have our Renaissance Learning in there as the increase. We have products such as Q Global, which is a testing software that allows our school psych to analyze test results for multiple platforms. We have our IXL in there as well, because our guidance team monitors that along with our ACES program. And that's the bulk of that. I can get you a full list of, every item that's in that increase area.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
We're in the thick of budget season. I was telling Mrs. O'Coin before I have highs and I have lows throughout every day of budget season. Right now, I'm right in the middle. So within your packet, you'll see listing of staffing. There's over 105 staff FTEs at the high school. You'll see the listing by department throughout there. Our class sizes, you'll see what we had in October. A little over 1,113. As of February 1st, we were at 1,106. 7 kids. We had some in and out. We had some kids a couple of kids go to Job Corps, which is a very good thing for them. We had some move away, as well as some move-ins, but the delta was 7. My projections, I went a little high on the projections. I usually try to add 5 at each grade. In the 9th grade at a higher number, 295. I know I think we said 350 8th graders in the district right now. Usually, the magic numbers are around 60 or 70. Some go to Bay Pass, some go to private. That's usually a pretty consistent pattern.
Just a question, how many of those are school choice? Do you have the figure?
Yep, I have that right here, yep. So, school choice, 134 right now. I can break it down even more if you want. I have 26 9th graders, 45 10th graders, 33 11th graders, and 30 12th graders. The major towns right now are Southbridge 58, Webster 48, Oxford 18, Worcester 3, Douglas 2, and there's some ones around there, Spencer, Sturbridge, Millbury, and so forth. That's pretty consistent. It pretty much stays the same in terms of the norm there.
Did every slot get filled? Or
No.
did we-
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, we have to kind of redesign that how we do that this year. I know we tend to do it at the end of April and approve those numbers. I'm going to suggest we do that next month in March, whatever the number is that we approve to move forward. And usually it's the graduating seniors, so 30 right now. And then we can go out and market a little bit and be done with it by June, by the end of school. There's all stragglers, even now, luckily we've had some kids that have come to me and say, I'm moving in the middle of the year to where? And I said, do you want to stay? Yeah, we want to stay here. They go down and they become school choice kids. So I do think we have to design that a little differently and maybe put an ad in, a couple of the local papers and so forth saying slots are open now and go from there. I'd like it to be done with it by June, because when it straggles into the next year,
It's a good idea, yeah.
The law requires that you actually have to, you by law have to file by June 1st. But the law also requires that you identify slots beyond, so even in July. So when you read that law, it's a very complicated one. So while you can close it, you can't really close it. You identify initially the number of slots per grade, where you want them. And then, if those do not get filled, you have to go back and identify, and therefore, in July, you still could have open slots. So you can't just say we are closing it. Once you say there are X amount of slots open in the grade, that stays open until those are filled. Yeah, so while we, I agree, we
The
would
goal would
like
be
to
to
be
be
able
filled
to.
by June.
The goal is to try to fill them, because obviously, at a high school, when you're talking about scheduling and programming, and given the fact that at a high school level, they're coming into our graduation requirements. And if they're coming in at an upper grade, then all of a sudden, things look a little different for them potentially in the requirements that they would have to meet. So it's a little bit more involved, but I just, I think it's important to identify early and to go out there and certainly, solicit as early and let it be known. Because we start getting calls early. People, have called Sandy probably already asking us about slots next year. So the sooner you do that, the better.
Can I just, I'm sorry,
Sure, yeah.
Mr. Chaplin, I didn't hear you. You still have open slots that you didn't fill?
Yep.
A lot?
I don't know the exact number.
Okay.
Mr. Matthew would know the number.
Okay.
I believe you said you had 139,
34.
134. That would indicate a number of open slots. So I wonder if maybe you and I can reconcile the numbers
Sure.
with the DESI.
I know
data.
last year we only approved like 34
Yeah.
openings.
I think, given the last year and this year that we have come up short in terms of filling these slots, to Dr. Nash's point about trying to break our reliance on that school choice, funding source, and trying to build that fund back up is even more critical now.
You'll also recall in budget assumptions, in that memo, that there's an assumption about a figure for school choice. And that's a pretty healthy figure. If you continue to have the cycle of reliance on that, and you continue to not have the ability to fill that at the high school, you are going to have to look at opening up slots at other grades. That is the reality, if you continue the reliance on using that to balance your budget. Because if we start to see a pattern where we're not going to fill all of those at the high school, and you continue to have almost a $900,000 reliance on it, then you're just going to have to look at other grades.
So moving on, I gave you a listing of average class sizes throughout the departments. There's not an exact science to this. I can clearly give you a list if you want of all the courses and what's there. This gives me a range, a nice visual, a quick visual of at all the different levels that we have. I know if there's a high percentage of classes that are over a certain amount, I know I need to start looking at what am I doing for teachers there. You can see we're really not anywhere near the class size of being, oh my God, I need another teacher at this point. You'll see the AP classes, the honors classes, the college prep classes throughout. So questions there? No?
It didn't look concerning, Mr. Chaplin, you're not.
I'm sorry?
You don't, it didn't look concerning that
Didn't-
you had any.
No, I wasn't. I mean, there's always some adjustments that we make around, increasing our AP classes, increasing our, what we're doing within all those levels. But there's nothing sticking out right now in terms of, oh my God, I need a teacher. So staffing requests, if you jumped, I gave you some data of other schools that I got through DESI that are similar to ours in size, socioeconomic, total enrollment, special populations. It's just to emphasize the point, in these three areas, there's a fatigue factor that's growing within these areas, specifically around the nurse, guidance department, and athletics. So as we look at the new staffing requests, the first one is consistent with the other presenters that you've heard over the last two evenings. In terms of the co-teaching model, we're going to start at the 9th and 10th grade level here, and through some reorganization in special ed, they're able to provide another special ed teacher with some of those funds, and me looking at my IAs, I could reorganize them and trade into and get another special ed teacher for the co-teaching model. The other positions, you can look at the data I gave you. The nursing position, if there's any one that a hill that I'm going to die on this year, it'll be the nursing position. I'm just going to preface, it's my third nurse in 3 years that I've had here since I've gotten here, and it is a hard job to have in this district, at this school, because there's just too many kids. The flow doesn't stop. The health needs increase every year, and somehow we have to get a second person in there. My first year here, she at least had some administrative support in terms of secretarial. We got rid of that the year after. So think even over the summer when physicals are coming in and so forth. This is the one where I would if we couldn't figure it out with new money, I would go back and look, and I would have to cut something to make this come to fruition.
Did you say they left because of the stress?
Yeah. I didn't hire the first person that was here. That was already hired before I got here. And throughout the year, she was like, "This is too hard," And it's not. It isn't the. There's a lot of diabetics. We have a couple of hemophiliacs, but they're older and they can care for themselves. They've gotten to that point. But she still has to oversee them coming in and check their numbers, and they do their own log and so forth. But on top of that, it's the concussions. It's the overseeing that. It's connecting with providers in the community. It's the working with the school adjustment counselors around anxiety and social emotional, connecting with providers. And I could show you the numbers, the daily numbers, and just the regular triage. Okay, it's not a lot of. There is a lot of. I need a cough drop. We say, get out of here. But it's everything else. And if you look at the other schools, all of them have 2 FTEs. So that.
All of the other schools in the DAP data.
In the DOC data.
Not all of the other
Not
schools
here.
in our district.
They know what I meant. They know what I meant.
The data that's provided for you comes out of DESE. Those are what they consider to be comparable school districts. And you can look at the range of size and see. It is a critical need. There are a couple of students, there are some students that will be moving in who will take more time of the single nurse based on, their medical needs. So it is an issue, and that's why it ranked, as you saw in our list, right at the top, because of the issue that we have about number of students that are serviced. Yeah.
Is it also an accreditation issue?
No,
It's not?
no,
Okay.
no.
Through the chair. I don't recall the spacing in your nurses.
Yeah.
So you have multiple bays, so this person.
Oh, yeah. There's our health suite has two exam rooms, a larger area, a weight area, and an office
Okay.
area. So there's
not a
plenty. I
spacing
mean, right
issue.
now, the one addition we did that we thought would help was the Becker students coming in. And we've had a consistent group of Becker students throughout the last 2 years. However, they can't do a thing. They can't even give a Tylenol. They can file something, which is nice, but we want to give them a good experience and exposure to what a busy health office is, and we're doing that. But it's an added job,
Teach them.
I know.
Spending time teaching them.
I'm hoping there's a hook a few. Go get your license, come back. So that's a big one. The athletic director I've talked about in years past here. I showed you the comparable data. In some of the other schools, the little star there indicates that they also have a full-time secretary. The AD does. The only way I could kind of post this isn't about making sure the fields are nice and officials are there and buses are ready. There is such an enormous amount to do within the athletic program that we have, Mr. Burke, who does a fine job, but you'd have to look at it as if we took Lori and Jen and had them teach 3 classes and got rid of their secretary. That's the number of kids we have in our athletic program every season. 250 to 320 kids that are there. So those are parents that you have to deal with. Those are scheduling you have to deal with. Those are, the athletic director is I did it for almost a year, and it is constant. And it's just such a different job than when we designed it in this district in the 1970s. we have to have a voice within Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Association of ADs, the MIAA. And, Sean teaches his 3 health classes, but there are days that he misses that he has to go to those meetings. If we don't, Shepherd Hill won't have a voice, and things happen, when we got the bad schedule where they put us in a different league or whatever. So it's that important. It really is an athletic administrator is the way you have to view it.
I have a couple of questions on
Yeah,
that.
go ahead.
That figure you gave, so he'd be taken out of the teacher's contract and be made an administrator? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
I didn't make that suggestion yet. The only thing on here right now is the stipends that are there, and as well as the our department head in PE and health would that stipend would also be in here. Now, if you wanted to look at, I could look at that, and I don't want to say this on camera, but we could look at eliminating the health position.
Well, that's
okay?
my next question. Someone would have to take his 3 classes, if it were Mr. Burke, so say, who's
We
going
would
to
have
take
to
his
look at that.
classes?
We would have to look at that. I would go back and look at that if you wanted me to, because then it would be a wash. There really wouldn't be new money in there.
Right, but if you have to replace 3/5 of a teacher, that's a lot of money. That's not showing up here.
Right, and I wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
So I would have to absorb, right now, our health and PE, it's really our health and consumer family services. So we have a wonderful home ec, consumer family services. We would have to reduce the number of those classes to even out. Maybe we have 2 health classes and 3 family consumer right now we have 3 health classes and 4 family consumer services.
But you have the staff to do.
Yeah, I have 2 staff right there to do that right now.
So you just fill more kids into those classes?
Yeah, and not everyone would get health, which would stink, but I would strongly consider it if I had to go back
But
and
if they
find.
don't have health, where do they go? Study?
They would go to another elective. There's
Okay.
plenty of other electives that they have
So there's someplace for them
here.
to go, just
Yeah.
not the right subject, basically.
Right, yeah, it would just be another elective that they have, business law, all the other electives that we have here.
Could part of your phys ed program, like your phys ed teachers, also teach a health curriculum as
Possibly,
part of it?
but we've gotten to a point there where there's such a volume of, there's a PE requirement. You have to take
Right.
3 semesters
Right.
of PE. So, right now, we've gotten to a place where there is 9th grade PE. Every 9th grader comes in and gets PE, no
Right.
matter what. Those classes are about 37, 36, which is okay. That's a normal kind of size gym
Okay,
class.
That's a big class.
And then they've created a bunch of electives now, okay, where they could just take throughout the rest of their high school career. You only need 3 semesters. Now, many kids take more, and we encourage that. It's an elective they could do, but they got to take 3. So, right now, the way we manage it, every 9th grader comes in and gets 1 under their belt. Sometimes they get 2, in that first year. Then they just have to take 1 over the next 3 years. And it's semester-based, so they can, kids that don't want to get rid of the 3, they can be done their first semester of their sophomore year. And they can go and take all their other electives that they want. So, maybe, I guess the original answer is maybe we could do that.
Do you provide a waiver for a student?
No.
No, okay.
No. That's a big can of worms.
I know.
Because who do you do it for? And I gotta be honest with you, there are kids that I strongly would have considered it, but it would have opened up a can of worms.
Right.
We have a student who's on the junior US swim team. She goes every day,
Right.
leaves here at 2 o'clock, goes to WPI. I would probably say she's getting her PE requirement,
Yeah, I would think so.
But if I do that, what about the person that dances year round? I'm not gonna get, I have enough parent conversations that I have to have. Those are big
They had
ones.
that
That's
in
hard.
Worcester where the football team could get exempt.
Sure,
It was just,
right,
it was
right.
how to keep track of
Hey,
attendance
quite
and
honestly,
everything.
the show choir, the choreography they
Yeah,
do,
right.
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I'm not
Fine.
prepared to open that can of worms up this year.
But just to go back to my original question,
Yeah.
so this person would be put into an administrative position and would have to have certification as some kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
administrator?
that is the trend right now. Most athletic directors, athletic administrators are a principal, assistant principal licensure.
Okay.
And because it's that level.
It also gives you another level of
Administrator,
administration
yeah.
Yeah.
in the building, particularly at a high school level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it is the second school day. I mean, we're open till 9, 10 o'clock at night,
Yep.
you
It
know?
provides ability too in a job description typically to pick up some of the, as a department head, some of the evaluation of staff, because now they're a department head and they have licensure as an administrator and they're not part of the teachers' union. So it has that.
The other one is,
Jamie has a
I'm sorry, go
question.
ahead. I'm sorry, Terry.
I know we were just kind of spitballing here, but I would have a very strong opinion about you possibly getting rid of a health class for this age student where they're making decisions in the next couple of years that are
Mhm.
truly going to impact the rest of their
Sure.
lives. And I get that this was just a conversation, but I want you to know my point of view. I have a public health background, that's what I do every day, but
I'm with you.
But also
Yeah, I don't think
still
we're gonna get
feel-
rid of anything. We would, for her, in the scenario she presented, the teacher that teaches 3 sections of health right now, we would eliminate that. Not eliminate health, we would figure that out somehow, because it is important.
It really is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's critical to
Absolutely.
their decision-making
Sure.
process.
And-
Their
and-
brains are not developed to the
And
level
they get that
they
out of a
need to
lot
be.
of different
Okay.
coursework here, but I don't want to say eliminate health. That position we would, and we would have to figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah, the
I just wanted
.6
to,
teacher,
Yeah.
health teacher.
just
Yeah.
wanted
I-
to
no, I'm
be
with you.
clear
I'm
on
with
that.
you.
No.
Moving forward, the guidance department, as we grow and their plate grows with pathways that we've developed over the past couple of years. Before I got here, you eliminated a guidance director and replaced it with a regular guidance counselor as the department head with a 3/4 of a caseload. When I mentioned the fatigue is there as well, because we've expanded all, and we're going to continue to expand. We're never going to stop expanding with the pathways that we've created, Project Lead the Way, and other things that we do within the building. If you look at the numbers, we're below there as well. It would be wonderful if we could get a guidance director at some point, a year-round person that's there. But listen, I understand the situation that the district's in as well. The addition of the 2 school adjustment counselors has been wonderful. They can handle any clinical risk problem that we have in this building, along with myself, from my background. That's why, we made the decision to not replace the school psychologist here. My need of a school psychologist is to come in and test and leave. That's all we need here. The school adjustment counselors are doing wonderful in terms of their caseloads that they're managing, the groups that they're implementing here. The connections that they've made with Harrington Hospital are outstanding. We have 3 outpatient providers that come in throughout the week that start seeing kids here with the hope of transitioning into the community where kids just don't get to the therapist, in the community. There's a lot of different wonderful things that they're developing over the next couple of years, so that's been a real positive. But the department as a whole, just to manage 1,100 kids, is hard in terms of the guidance work. The last one is the custodian. We cut that 2 years ago. When we did it, probably 3 days after we did it, I was kicking myself in the you-know-where, because we're a big building that's opened 300 nights a year, and it's really been a struggle covering the building. Now, that's the last of my priorities, because I know Jerry's going to be retiring next year, and Jerry's wonderful. So I know that's going to be replaced with a person who will come in and be able to do some of the work. So right now I share someone with Dean as well, a part-time person that comes over and helps pick up the slack, but it's a busy building, you know that. Questions on staffing? Yep.
I don't know if it's possible, can you provide a sample or a flow of how students move through 9th through 12th grade as far as meeting the graduation requirements, to help us understand what you're looking at as far as staffing is concerned?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I'll definitely prepare that for you.
Sure.
We have several, a program called Naviance that kind of follows them through to 12th grade and works through and is connected to all of the colleges and so forth. But right now we're going through, there's a next generation of that called the MyCap, and it's really a individualized learning plan for everybody is the goal, to meet with guidance several times a year to kind of go through that and see where you're at. I think next month, Ms. Ayers and I are going to come, because we got probably several grants that are in the works that we're more than likely going to get, that's going to help a little bit in terms of some of the fiscal stuff that we have here.
Okay.
And we're going to come and present that once. I want to get it first. We're having our final interview at the end of February for one of them. So it's an Innovation Pathways designation. There's probably only about 10 schools in Massachusetts that have it. We're in the finals. We pretty much got it. Can I say that, Karen? Knock on wood. We'll just have to go through the final hoop. And it's going to help us a lot in terms of opening us other opportunities for grants and so forth. But I'll definitely get you that kind of trend.
Good to understand, just to address the concern
Yeah.
Mrs. Terry had about, if we're shifting people around, are we still going to be able to provide enough opportunity for kids to meet their pathway and then not get stuck?
Yeah.
Because one of the things we pride ourselves on
Yeah.
is the variety of what we offer kids.
Yeah, and I'd love to tell you about it. I'd like to take an hour right now and tell you about it, but I want to wait for next month, and Karen and I to tell you about the stuff that we have planned in terms of just getting students industry exposure, real-world exposure that's going to connect to what they're doing in this building. and It's going to be outstanding. We might have to schedule 3 or 4 hours for that if you wanted to do that.
March will be a better month. We're a little
Yeah, no,
burnt out
no,
right now.
absolutely much.
You also, every year, approve the high school program studies, and in that, it gives you the pathways, and it will show you, graduation requirements as well as the typical pathway for a student at different levels, so that would be helpful too.
Okay. Technology hardware requests. There were other things on here that didn't make it. Now, unfortunately, I can tell you that we did get the Project Lead the Way engineering track. We're starting that next year. So part of that, those monies that we're getting this year is going to help us with an additional Chrome card and some other technology around that. So we were lucky to have that. And we were, I kind of said, Rich, do I have to take it off there if we get this other area that's coming in there? So we took it off, and we'll put it back on next year. Building improvements, I could spend 3 hours here if you wanted to. That's why I didn't go into a lengthy thing. Every year, there's about 15 dire projects that we have to do. We get one done. Just to give you an example, the past 3 weeks, we had 2 pipes burst. Our elevator was broken almost daily. I was almost giving the elevator maintenance guy an office because he was here every day. I knew what he'd eat for lunch. The whole gamut. There's a list of things. Our tennis courts aren't playable. We play at Nichols. I could go on and on if you wanted to, but we don't have time. The one thing that this water shutoff valves has been on my list for the last 3 years. I'm glad it made the cut this year because it really allows us to, when a pipe does break, when a pipe breaks now, we have to shut the whole water down for the building. This is going to allow us to shut a floor down and be able to continue to function. The elevator, the winch system in the gymnasium, our science labs. I'm going to tell you, they were the top line product that a school could have in 1977, not in 2019. And we have to continue to look at that. Some of the grants that I'm busting out to tell you about are going to help us with that. The SOI that we do, I start working on next month, is going to help us with that. I'm going to lay it on thick, with the maintenance costs that we've had over the last 3 years. But I was telling Mrs. O'Coin before we got here, we got to have a Lou Bertinazzi, in the State House to kind of come, and he's no longer there. He hasn't been there in years. But we got to find somebody that's going to, and we got to knock on a door and do something different because Webster got okayed last year. Spencer got okayed this year. We shouldn't get penalized for having a good footprint of a building that we care for. Rich and I told the guy when we saw him at Bay Path, listen, just do it for us once. You forget about us for another 50 years. Well, I'll be gone by then, I hope. But it's definitely on the forefront that we have to kind of keep going with it. Because the students do lose. I think we do a great job in terms of what we do in science and so forth. But imagine what the job we would do if we had a nice state-of-the-art science lab.
And Webster got it, and their school's a little newer
Yeah.
than this school. This
Yeah.
school's older than
Yeah.
Webster.
Let's see here. The lines, I'm not going to go through every line. If you'd like me to, I could. The only bump that you'll see that's a significant bump is in our science supplies, where we're doing our 3rd year of the Project Lead the Way course load. We're at this next year's medical interventions. And there's a set amount of supplies you have to buy for that. So we knew that going in. And that's why you'll see a little bit of a bump there, $15,000 from last year. Any other questions on line items that people have? No? Great. Anything else? I gave you the athletic budget. I can talk to you for another hour if you want on that.
Where are you in the cycle of NEASC accreditation?
We are, we had it done right before I got here. So we're a part of the next wave of the 2020 and beyond, I think they call it. So I think we just handed, last year we handed in our first follow-up. We have one more, so I think we're gonna get back into that probably in 3 years, 2 years maybe,
So why are we budgeting 5,000?
because they charge us every year
Oh,
5,000.
that's it, okay, got it.
Yeah, that's a
Right.
membership fee, if you'd like to call it that.
Exciting.
Elaine?
Mr. Chaplin?
Yeah.
Question on the athletic budget.
Yes,
And the differences in the transportation costs, depending on what sport you're looking at.
Okay.
I'm seeing 450 or 600 or 1,000.
yep,
So is
that's
it,
accurate.
no, is it just, is
So,
it number of
This
buses?
this is,
it
no, this
based
is
on-
the example I have to give
Okay.
you. So, if a particular sport, golf or football, they're just driving to a place, it's an hour, and then they come back.
Mhm.
Wrestling, they're driving to a place and spending the day, because they're in
Okay.
an all-day tournament. So that's
Okay.
the biggest factor.
Okay, so the bus.
it's
it
length of
Goes
time.
back, okay, so
It's
it's
wait
based
time,
on time?
yep.
Okay. The other thing that, interested in just for, kind of, we've talked about it, and I know I'm interested in looking at the costs associated with the extracurricular activities with our music
Yep,
in our show choir.
okay,
In really just kind of looking at long-range plan as whether or not we're getting to equity of helping those students out too. I know we've talked about the thousands of dollars it costs to be in show
Sure.
choir. So I'd just like to start having that information
Okay.
to help frame that conversation going forward.
that's fine.
Thank you.
We can definitely gather that. We just got a letter today that, from the National USA Show Choir, whatever their titles are, and it began with Fantasy and Illusion are at the top of the nation's show choirs. So with that comes a cost, you know, I haven't spent a lot of time looking at the exact every penny, because they do a lot of fundraising. And the Music Association, Parents, does a lot of fundraising, and, you know, I'm not quite sure what the supplementation is, but I know they work really hard.
And I'll tell you.
And it's year-round.
Right.
It's year-round, those
Right.
kids work. And we try to, we've had the habit in the past that we're gonna be moving away from, where when I first got here, kids were having these extraordinary bills that they had to come up with, and they were being told, you can't graduate. I said, I'm never saying that, okay? We gotta figure out a different way, you know, to have them do it. So we had to do a work study here. But that money has to, I can't go and grab it, go with a quad there and go to the money tree and find that. We have to budget for that, and we never do, you know. They work hard, and they deserve all the accolades that they get, specifically the band as well. But we do, it is worth a deeper dive into what
I
it looks
would
like.
like to.
But I remember, Elaine, that a few years back, we started talking about that. We
Right.
thought, you know, that cost was so high. And we had so many parents here that said, we're paying. I had a neighbor that her child was in it.
Mhm.
She was telling me, I'm paying.
Right.
So, because they're so proud of their kids.
Mhm.
And,
And you never really get.
you remember that,
Where
Kathy?
else are you gonna get that experience? Now,
Right.
I will tell you that the number of kids that are, eventually, we're gonna have an AP music theory class here. We're gonna have enough kids in that to go, because each year, the numbers of kids that go off to music school grow.
Right.
And you know, I hired one of them back, you know, Ashley Rassicott. She's a foreign language teacher here, but she is so invested. But each year, I look at those numbers, and those numbers go up each and every year. And we're building something here, and there is a cost, but it is worth a deeper dive,
it
Elaine.
is, right.
Thank you. I would appreciate
Sure.
that, because for me, it's, you know, looking at sports, you know, there's some sports that our investment is covering 52% of the sports, and then there's some that we're covering 100%. And it really, I think it's all about providing equal opportunity for all kids. So it's worth studying for
Sure.
down the road.
And I know with athletics, it's hard because you have to compare apples and apples. So
Sure.
the football team is always going to generate more money versus the golf team, or so and so, or
Yeah.
the wrestling team. The wrestling team, we barely get 10 kids to play because we get kids from Tantascwa, we get kids from Oxford to come and co-op with us. That we need to build, but it's really based on. It's hard to compare apples and apples. because of the buses.
It really gets into really more equity.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
football, actually, in some of the scheme of it, is one of our less expensive sports.
Well, 'cause of the volume
amount
of kids.
The amount
Yeah,
of
volume of kids,
students.
yeah.
So I'm not looking to shrink any opportunity for anybody, but if we have an element of what we offer that is 100% based on kids fundraising or paying for, and I would like to see if there's an opportunity that we can in some way contribute or support to that.
Yeah.
As well.
I know, I brought up a couple of years ago when I first got here about maybe taking a look at the fees that we charge. You know, it's 6 to 1, half dozen to another. You know, my son runs year round. It's $200 a season. I know I have to pay that. You know, here, the fear is if we raise it, are we gonna lose kids? I try to do whatever I can I waive some fees if a kid can't afford it. I do whatever I can to kind of never have a no. If a kid wants to play a sport and they make a team, we'll figure it out, you know. So if we could look at raising the fees, but what are we collecting? You know, and how do we support it? And there's a lot of different levels of that. So we can take a deeper dive there as well.
Can I ask you just a couple questions? about
Sure,
the
yeah,
fee?
please.
So you're charging $150 per sport?
For sport, yeah.
And then, so does cheering not have?
Oh my gosh, you brought up cheering.
They-
So,
I'm sorry.
So, all right, so this is the cheering is maintained by the MIA as a kind of an offshoot, okay? Because if cheering was a sport, they would have to begin at a certain time in August and end in November. Cheering never wants to be a sport. They want to be able to do it year-round. So the fees associated with that are a little bit different. I mean, it's still the same fee, I believe, but they do a lot of fundraising on their own. We do invitationals here to support that. So they're constantly doing fundraisers to supplement. And they never want to turn anybody away either.
Okay, so you're not charging a fee?
Oh, no, there's a fee. There's a fee.
It's
But
just
they
not-
also do, is it on there?
No, it's cost revenue, there's no cost revenue.
Hold on, let me just take a quick look.
Fees under chair.
Let me, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna loop back around to that, because there is a fee. They still have to pay. But they do a lot of fundraising to self-absorb all the tournaments and so forth that they do. So I will get that information for you.
And then do you have a family cap on the fees?
I believe
I
it's
thought we did.
$500.
Something like that.
Once you hit that $500 mark and you have 5 kids, that's it.
Okay.
You know, I think it's $500. Now, we do not collect for if someone's playing hockey,
Yeah.
we co-op with Auburn, they go and play at Auburn, we don't collect those fees. Auburn does, because that's what the sport is. Okay. Same way we collect the wrestling fee of the, so hockey's a very expensive sport. That fee's about $600 to play hockey.
That's
That's
cheap.
a separate fee.
Hockey's
Are
expensive.
you a hockey mom?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking
So
about.
when you look at something like hockey and you have some discussion about some of your other non-sports but activities, it's very similar. So you could never fund in your budget the amount of ice time that you would need. So in many instances, it's either offset by a booster club that comes to you and donates money for that ice time, or some additional charge is handed to the student. That's the same thing that's happening in music. I will be very upfront with all of you that no matter what sport, no matter what activity, you will not be able to fund all of that to the way that you need to, because simply we do not have that. We do not have that availability to do that. Whether it's a music program, that is an extraordinary program that we have that goes above and beyond, where you've got national competitions, you've got costumes, you've got everything. Or whether it's, ice hockey with a state championship team that you've had for the last 35 years, and they use another $30,000 in ice time. That will never come from your budget, simply because most school budgets are too busy trying to figure out how to put staff in. You've heard tonight, and you're going to hear me say later on, there isn't a single position here that we don't need. You do not have the money to fund any of them, except for the ones that were mandated. You do not have that, and you would have to direct us to do something different. And that's what these building principals have tried to do, look very creatively, cost efficiently, on how can we do some things a little differently. But, presently, as I said to you earlier, every single position here is a needed position, and we're scrambling, and we've asked them to think outside the box. They've done a a great job in doing that and presenting it, but this district is like many. We do not have the ability to fund all of these new positions. We're doing some reorg that will give us that, and we're going to think creatively in some other ways, but any of these positions, and so when you start talking about, and look, it's not a caution, I just, we want to do that. I agree with you, the equity point, in sports and activities, but all of those clubs and activities that have grown over the years, that have become starship flagships for a school district, have always, in most districts, whether it's a music program, a student council, or a sport, have on their own, over the years I've seen, had to raise substantial amounts of money to make them where they are. And that unfortunately is the reality that we face in public education, so.
Can I ask one
Sure,
question?
please.
Why is soccer and lacrosse, why are the uniforms 10,000 and 11,000 as opposed to,
Well, they're really big
Right.
uniforms.
because everybody else is like 500, 800, but yet.
It could be just sheer volume.
I think it's a cycle.
Kind of, not 11,
No, I don't think,
but everybody else is kind of like,
Let me go and look at it.
like 500. and-
Right.
I don't think they'd be that, Stephanie.
Are they buying new uniforms? Are
Yeah, I
they
think
buying
it's-
new
I think that might be an
uniforms?
error.
Yeah, that, yeah.
I mean, the sheer volume, what you're talking about is.
Right, you got a
It's
bigger-
boys and girls, okay,
Right.
that could be it, but I think that might have been just maybe an extra zero in there.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think,
I
I'll go back and check.
Okay.
I'll look back.
Replace certain years.
But,
Yeah, no, there's a cycle, there's a rotation
right.
of, this past year's been volleyball, next year I think is field hockey and softball, I think. So that's always been the
Yeah,
case.
the typo,
You know,
yeah.
and we have we're in the summer program, the sports academy that feeds into the revolving account as well, and we try to offset, monies there as well. Okay, thank you. Okay, good?
Good.
All right.
Thank you.
Now that we've heard presentations from all 7 schools, the committee's seen a backlog, really, of capital projects. I want to remind the older committee members and the veteran, I'm sorry, seasoned veteran committee members, the new members on the committee, as well as the public. 2 years ago, the district made the decision to not pursue the capital override and funding that we were looking for in lieu of pursuing the operational override. And while that obviously was a very smart decision, especially since it was successful, it did, really put the capital planning back a little bit. With the debt for the 2 middle schools coming up and the reconstruction done at Mason Road and Dudley Elementary, done 20 years ago, coming off the books in both towns, fiscal 20 still has the possibility for us to be the right year to go forward and present our needs to the town. So I think the Budget and Finance Subcommittee, has certainly talked enough about, what we're trying to do and where we're trying to get to. But, again, I just wanted to reiterate, we did make that decision 2 years ago to pursue the operational override rather than the capital.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for it? Okay.
Okay, well, thank you for having us here tonight. We're excited to share the curriculum and professional development budget with you. And again, kudos to all the stakeholders who helped produce this document. If you look at the first page and the first category, you will see amounts there for course reimbursement, course attendance, for both the district and teacher level, and please know that those are required per contract agreement. So I don't know if you have any questions about that obligation at all before I move on.
I think that it's a good place to say that Mr. Matthew was going to look at the amount we've used, correct?
Yes, based on, for DCTA negotiations, yes, but we still have to budget what's in the contract.
Sure, I
regardless
understand
of
that,
how
but
much
it-
has been used.
But it would be appropriate for the rest of the entire committee to know what is used when we find that out, I would imagine.
Just for informational purposes in terms of
I
trend?
think it's important
If
to
we
know.
use
Right.
the 70,000, we use the 7,000 every year, we don't really know that, do we?
No, but as Mr. Matthews said, we are required
Right,
to
it's in
put
the
it there,
contract, right.
yes, just in case, because we don't know. Okay, then we have CPR training, first aid, AED, CPI restraint training. Those are also required professional development, and those amounts are listed for you so that you can see, whether we have a certain number of presenters or people on a team by building that would be in receipt of such training. Any questions on that chunk? Okay, you want to talk about the?
Yep, so then we have, in the contracted services, we have in our proposal for another team, which I gave you more in detail in your packet, a couple pages later, with our project-based learning, team. So this year we have a cohort of about 35 teachers that we're doing in-house. I'm doing a train the trainer. So next year we're gonna have another cohort with these people coming in. So that's what that's for.
Okay, and then you see the Teachers 21 consultant fee. That is consistent with the special ed reorg that you've heard about from Director Lorinda Allen. And that gives you the total at the bottom there for the district-wide PD. Okay, on to the next page. We have to set aside funds for PD supplies and materials. These might be the training manuals, for example, that go along with the first aid and CPI, the PBL materials as well. The Marshall Memo and the Grant Watch annual subscription are to keep us abreast with current practices or grant opportunities so that we can monitor that at the district level. So then you see the total PD supplies and materials for a little over 4,000 there. Any questions on that chunk? Okay, the next piece. Okay, over the summer, we have a number of curriculum study groups that need to happen. I don't know if you're familiar with the change in the social studies curriculum frameworks, but they have been changed at the state level. Those were changed in June. So we have formed a social studies task force. We've been looking at where we need to change scope and sequence, and a lot of that is happening at the middle school in particular. So over the summer, we need to take a deeper dive. I did not include the new frameworks. That's a document that's over 200 pages. But just to kind of encapsulate the highlights, there is more of an emphasis on civics, and in fact, there will be civics projects at middle school and a civics graduation requirement, and that needs to be rolled out next year. There's less emphasis on geography, more on EUS history. That's going to push down again to the middle school, and that's, again, where we need to map everything out and develop curriculum, change curriculum in order to meet the state standards. So that money you see there should be allocated for the curriculum study group for social studies. There is a notation that says this could potentially be offset by a grant. I was notified last night we did not receive that grant. So there is no more potential for offset.
And Barbara, do we get reimbursed for any professional development from the state?
Through the state?
Yeah.
No. A little later in the document, you'll see the Title IIA grant that I write and the Title IV grant that Karen writes.
And that's all the reimbursement?
That we get from the federal government, which, trickles down to us, yes. But no, these are things that we need to do on our own.
Barbara, would you also note, and I think it's important, that while we're going to map curriculum, Please note that you could see next year in your budget the need for additional instructional resources to now match what has been mapped, particularly at the middle school. And with the introduction of civics, which of course is going to be required. So I would expect that there could be a substantial increase in the material costs, resources, textbooks, whatever, that we're going to need.
Correct. Okay, the next item is the K through 8 team for co-teaching. Again, you've all heard about the special education reorg, and you have a memo from SPED Director Linda Allen on that. The same applies to the high school co-teaching study group. You want to talk about the science curriculum?
Yep,
study
so
group as well?
basically, I put also the addendum in here to explain the science study group for K through 5. Their new workbooks, the contract for the subscription will be running out at the end of the year next year, so we want to get ahead of the game and kind of put a place, look at the curriculum and look at where they want to go to match the potential hopeful reading series that we'll be getting to kind of instead of doing workbooks, we want to go with more, literacy-based science and hands-on kits. So we're going to look at that next year.
Okay. Sorry.
No, just a quick question. We keep talking about a K-8 PD for the special ed, like co-teaching.
Right, and then there is also a high
also-
school co-teaching.
Okay,
So
good.
if you notice, those are broken out for you at the bottom of that third page.
Third page.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. Okay, then we have in-house professional development. We have presenters who are qualified to give PD that is required for recertification, such as special education topics, ELL topics, et cetera. I'm sure you're aware that teachers need to recertify every 5 years, and there are some requirements on what that looks like. So that money there is set aside for stipends for in-house presenters. And then the last amount is for the implementation of the reading series Karen just mentioned.
Should we be able to make a decision that we're able to afford one, we would want to be able to provide implementation training this summer, so we'd be
Right.
ready to go.
So people
So
would
that's
need
why
to
this is a
obviously
placeholder.
get familiar with the reading series, should we have one, and be able to prepare to roll it out in the fall.
Then would we have to buy new textbooks and so forth? Is that-
That's the
Right,
whole
that's
point.
the
Yes,
caveat.
that
Should we
is-
get
yes,
one?
Yes.
We need to spend time with it over the summer
Right,
and
implement, yes.
prepare it.
So can I ask further on that to the chair?
Sure.
Why are we looking to do this now when we know we're so budget strapped and we have a system in place for our readers already?
Well, there are a couple of things that are going on. The Basel series that they have now is outdated and no longer aligned with the standards.
It's only 10 years old though, isn't it?
That's right.
Right.
And it is 10 years old, and that is the reason.
So you think 10 years is too?
Oh,
It-
absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So we are, we're pursuing a couple of different options, trying to see which series, McGraw-Hill, National Geographic, Houghton Mifflin has a 2020 copyright date that they're going to present to us, which one would be the best fit, and then maybe what we could do potentially for financing options and the like.
And so you engage 40 teachers through the process to, I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
5 teachers through the process, I don't know if I'm.
Right, well,
understanding
realize it's grades 1 through 4,
Yeah.
and it's both sides of the district.
Right, but I guess I meant more in the, who decides which system is the best?
Oh, so we do have a group, we have been looking at this, principals have also been including that, the reading specialists. So we're hoping to make a decision this spring. This isn't for making the decision, this is if we purchase a certain series, we need to then plan, train,
Yeah.
and be ready to implement in the fall. So that takes some time.
Sure, no, if you decide on a series, but we don't feel that there's a budget.
You would have to vote this.
Yeah, you have to approve
Yes.
it.
I guess
Yes,
that's what
the
I was
final
trying to get at.
decision is
Thank you.
yours. We want to be
Yes.
ready to go when we identified that there was a potential for a need, because your series is 10 years old.
Okay.
So we have a committee for picking out the series?
Yes, so it had started a few years ago,
Okay.
and funds were not approved, so I tried to pick up the threads of where that was left
Yeah.
off. But then again, Houghton Mifflin now has this new option that
And
we're
we have
also looking
teachers
into.
involved in this committee,
Yes.
right? 'Cause they'll be using it.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a question to Dr. Nash and you as well? Like, so if we're not able to fully support a new reading program,
Mhm.
which I believe we completely need, can you support, is there a possibility to say, okay, we're gonna enter grade 1?
Yes, yeah. you
And then
can.
the next
Yeah.
year, we're gonna fill in.
Right, phase
now
it
we've
in.
got- Phase it in.
Yes.
There are different approaches, that most publishers will work with you, whether it's through a financing, long-range plan.
Right.
The urgency is, I don't know that you have 3 years to wait, because then you've lost that grade.
That's what I was
You've
Okay.
lost that grade that's gone.
Okay.
So, while I understand, it start small if you can, with, that 4th grader now doesn't have the opportunity next year, so.
And then it's gonna be 5 years old,
Right,
base,
yeah,
the
right.
book, by the time if you do it every year.
I don't know if you can answer that, but how much is the whole series cost? If you were to, do you have
I
a,
can give you a ballpark,
that's what I'm
but please
asking.
realize it is just
Yeah,
that,
right, but-
250,000.
$50,000.
for grades 1 to 4?
Yes,
1 through 4, right.
both
And I
sides of the
think
district.
that's the best
exactly
way to
right.
go.
Exactly, that's why, right. Yeah. Yeah. Every single teacher, everything that they
I
need.
thought we should gonna
Right.
update the,
Right.
250,
Total.
250?
Yes.
yeah.
And that's, yeah.
Jamie was just asking about, why is 10 years old enough? And I was trying to say, I think it's,
Oh, research-based, and what we
Right.
know, just what we know about how to teach reading and the components of reading and how it is, it phenomenally different than what 10 years ago. And the approach to it, it brings equity and parity. The skill sets that all of our staff have look very different. What any instructional resource does, it provides opportunities to bring, hear us talk about parity and equity across the district. In reading, what has happened in the last 10 years with Calkins and Columbia University and all of that has blown our concepts of how to teach reading out of the water. Unfortunately, those series are extremely expensive. They come with more bells and whistles and online materials. Basically, they take everything that a teacher needs, whether, a first-year teacher or a veteran teacher, and it is there included. One of the things that oftentimes districts, in buying what we used to call basils, the basal, in the upper grades we call it the anthology when you're an English teacher at secondary level. Oftentimes districts did not build out beyond that. So when we are talking about teaching reading to young students, in any classroom, you want to have up to 1,000 titles at all ranges, particularly accessible, so that we can have chapter books for some students in grades 2, as well as grades 4. And that in and of itself can be a cost. Sometimes that cost, when we talk about the $250,000, oftentimes part of that is in that cost. It's not just the textbook that you're getting anymore.
Oh,
with
yes,
it.
I mean, there's differentiation for ELL, for SPED.
So you're
yeah.
seeing, it looks so different than even 5 years ago. But to go back to your question, it's just simply what we know about how to teach struggling readers has changed dramatically in the research and the best practice. And 10 years in a basal is a long time.
I was,
Yeah.
I guess, comparing in my mind to new math.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I guess I have a very different
Yeah.
opinion of if
Well-
new math is perfect solution.
Well, that's different. Don't compare mathematics and approaches in mathematics series to reading.
Fair
Very,
enough.
very,
But
very
that's
different.
what
And I
was-
know exactly what we all had Chicago math. That was the new thing. Different ways of coming in, and districts got on board and bought it, and then found out it really wasn't the best thing, since sliced bread. But with reading, it's pretty consistent with the knowledge that has come, the level of knowledge and understanding of how to teach it, particularly all of the components that one needs to understand and have a great deal of knowledge about. Remember too, when you think about an elementary teacher, They come as a generalist to a degree. But yet the most important subject, that the foundation that we've got to give them is how to read. Because if they can't read, then they can't do anything else. And they don't, when you look at the veteran teachers who've been teaching for a number of years, and you look at what they took as an undergraduate, first of all, those courses didn't exist back then to take. We didn't know that much about reading 20, 30, 40 years ago. And even today, you'll see at an elementary level that while some things have changed, a lot has not changed. But there is a strong recognition that there needs to be a strength in reading. If you look at the certification now and you look at the MTELs that a special ed teacher needs to take, it is proficiency in reading. And I can tell you, it's not reading comprehension. So the importance that this state has placed on the fact that if you are a SPED teacher and we're going to put you in a classroom, you need to be you need to pass MTELs in reading. And the level of what that test is like is staggering in many ways. So if we're expecting that, we want to be able to give them the tools and the resources really to do what they need to do.
Thank you.
Okay.
And let me say one thing, and that's why the critical piece of connecting that to that library piece and having someone there, it all kind of connects. It's the one place, if I could advocate for more than anything else, along with special ed, that I would tell you, spend those dollars early and often in how to ensure that all students can read. That motivation, that happiness that comes, that wanting to be in school, because as soon as you get into middle school, the density of the curriculum, the amount of it just boggles kids. And that's where we see them start to struggle and start to just fall back, and then they get disengaged, disenchanted, unmotivated, and then they become the issues that we have at high school. It is too late to start providing reading instruction at a high school level. We've lost that child.
Right, so the front loading is very important. Okay, so then you see the total there for the curriculum study groups, training, stipends, et cetera. The next part is the Title II grant that I alluded to earlier. We would write that grant generally over the summer. Then this is how that money would be spent. The first item is for Renaissance U, and this is the PD that goes along with the STAR testing, again, connecting with what the other school buildings utilize for their assessment software. This is the PD that goes along with it. District Building Mentor Coordinators. So I'm not sure if you're familiar, but all new teachers have to now attend a new teacher institute. They get a mentor. They have to log a certain amount of hours with that person. So this is something actually we are required to do as well. We put aside a certain amount of money for the district position as well as the 7 building mentors. What is difficult is we don't always know necessarily how many new teachers might come in, if someone gets ill in the middle of the year or something like that, but it is a required program. Then we also have the district math and literacy facilitators. Those job descriptions are online if you are new to the committee and have not seen them. So those are the stipends that go for the math. There are 12. For the literacy, there are 6, one per school, for K through 5. The new teacher mentors, those are the people who one-to-one mentor new people, either brand new to teaching or brand new to a building or perhaps even a new role. Any questions about those 4 things?
So these are stipend positions that exist currently in your DCTA contract, and these do not come out of the general budget. So when you look at the cost for district and building mentors, the facilitators, and the new teacher mentors, this is an area where we use a grant to offset that instead of charging it to your regular general ledger budget.
Right, everything under this Title IIA heading applies.
Right, so then the next chunk is really for Project Lead the Way training for all the new STEM curriculum and STEM grants that we've received over the last 2 years, which we're excited to implement. And I provided some detail for you in the back of your packet. It just kind of shows you where we've been and where we're going as far as the course outlines and who's teaching what. So basically, at the high school level, we have biomedical science. We're in our 2nd year of that. Next year, what Mr. Chaplin specified in his budget, our grant money is out, so he has money for equipment and supplies, and we also would be paying for the teacher training for that this summer. We do have other grants, though, that are paying for supplies for our middle schools, which is the what is that class that is being app creators, that is going to be implemented next year in the 8th grade. And so those teachers will be taking that. And as Mr. Chaplin said, we are excited to be recent awardees of the Project Lead the Way engineering grant. So we will be implementing a series of engineering classes. Next year is Introduction to Engineering Design, and the following year, Principles of Engineering, and the year after that, Computer Integrated Manufacturing. So we are, again, a recipient of a $35,000 grant for that. So really, you know, when we look at the PD, we are pretty much covering it with grants. So all good there.
Title IV?
And then Title IV is another federal entitlement grant, and there's 3 categories, and what we're using it for is to enhance the use of technology in education. And these are placeholders that I've put here because we're thinking of what we want to do next year. And one of them is a license for a project-based STEM curriculum where teachers can implement into their courses, again, to go with the PBL theme for the high school. And then the other would be for some iPads for the music technology class at the high school.
Okay, any questions on that? All right, so, go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair.
Yes?
Just a question, when we're doing our actual PD days, is the only portion that we've got dedicated in your budget the in-house PD training, $3,000?
That actually is not on the PD days. Those are extra things that teachers provide, like book clubs and you know, we had some technology training. The things that we have allotted for PD days are the Project-Based Learning Academy for the $6,250 right now. And then a lot of things we rely on our in-house teachers.
Okay.
Yep.
I was
Oh, and then we have
wondering if there was
the
missing
teachers, the
request.
special ed co-teaching training as well.
That's going to be a big chunk.
Potentially happen on the full PD day.
Yeah. Okay, so you see the total curriculum and professional development budget, what is broken out as contractual obligation, non-contractual services and materials, and federal entitlement grants. Grand total, $278,000 and some change.
It's in the budget. This has been put into the budget.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good thing. So the technology budget, pretty much the same format as last year. Things are just kind of shuffled around a little bit. But anyone that's heard it before, it's pretty similar. I'm going to kind of move through it. If anyone has any questions, just stop me at any time. So first section is just technology goals for this year. In addition to the first few bullets there that are pretty much maintenance items, we're looking to replace the the network cables and patch panels at Shepherd Hill, as well as the remaining switches that haven't been replaced as part of last year's project. Pretty much the same thing that we did at the other 6 buildings last year, but this year I should say. And add additional wireless access points to certain areas to try to kind of beef that up a little bit. We're looking to replace 6 computer labs throughout the district. computers coming out of those labs. Like usual, they're going to go into the classrooms to try to replace some of the 8 to 9-year-old computers that are out there. We're going to begin rolling out Windows 10 on all devices. This is a very large project, something we wanted to start last year, but because of the 6 buildings that we wired, everything kind of got pushed a little bit. Replace the cafeteria point of sales terminals, replace some of the teacher laptops that are off warranty in May, replace a couple of NAS devices in both firewalls, and increase the internet connections from 1 gig to 5 gig on both sides of the district. Overview of the technology in the district, pretty much the same thing as last year. It's really just showing you, kind of what the staff, students, and parents have access to. Some of the things. Obviously, G Suite's one of the big things, the parents with the parent portal and whatnot. The achievements for the current year, so February 18 to February 19, we're able to replace some of those 8 to 9-year-old computers in the classrooms using machines that have come out of labs, or a combination of that and new machines. We replaced 3 Chromebook carts, so 90 Chromebooks. We deployed a new Chromebook cart at Shepherd Hill. Deployed a number of projectors, smartboards, iPads, and other peripherals. We replaced, like I said, the network cables, patch panels, and switches at 6 of the buildings. The wiring portion of that is completely done. The switches are all in place. We have some more work to do with configuring things and tweaking things. We just didn't have enough time with them before they had to go in there. The only thing left on that project is just to put, as Mr. Packett said, the AC in some of these closets. Some of the closets get very hot. Even at this time, some of them are 85 to 90 degrees. So we do have money set aside for that. And that'll wrap up that project there. Again, we added additional access points at all 6 schools to try to beef up the wireless there. And we closed approximately 1,900 tickets. 1,200 of those were just this year, this school year. Unlike previous years, we've kind of shown you the initial budget proposal. So initially we went, I brought forward a proposal of about $996,000. Should be noted that includes about $118,000 in a lease payment for devices, classroom devices that were purchased back in FY18. That also includes $134,000 roughly of anticipated E-rate reimbursement. I was asked to reduce that a little bit, so as I go over the next section over here, kind of breaking down the costs, I'll let you know where it is that we reduced. So the fixed annual expenses are about $720,000. Pretty much that's the the cost to open the doors, with the exception of that first line item, the hardware replacement line item. Back in FY15, we tried to establish a replacement line item to get on a replacement cycle for, at that time, it was really just computers. It was established initially at about $187,000. It's, gone down here and there. This year it's back up a bit. Now that line item is at about $217,000. That's about $130,000 less than I initially proposed. And again, this is to replace devices. This isn't just computers anymore, it's the Chromebooks. And if we have money to be able to do iPads and some of the other peripherals. Fiber WAN would be the next one, which is basically the connectivity between the schools. And your fiber internet connections at both Shepherd Hill and Charlton Middle School provide internet access to all 7 buildings. The firewalls themselves and the content filtering, network switch management, wireless APs, mobile device management, the desktop software licenses. These are the district ones. I'm going to get to the school-based ones in a second. But these are the ones that are pretty much, the only ones we've really managed because they cover all 7 schools. The district website, student information system, the library catalog server, and then we have district office software and subscriptions, so the finance software, the help desk, that type of stuff. And then the last item in that category would be the hardware maintenance, which would be the replacement parts to keep things running. Next section is what I just touched upon, is $118,000. We're in the 3rd year of a 4-year payment cycle. So this was for $457,000 worth of classroom devices purchased back in FY18. The idea at that point was we needed to get a lot of devices quickly for MCAS, mostly the Chromebooks. So it was spread over the 4 years. So hopefully 2 years from now, we'll be able to put that money towards something else. Projects and upgrades, it's listed at $61,600. Obviously, not everything in this list is on there. The first thing, the largest one being the network cable project at Shepherd Hill. That's $329,000. That was the lowest bid that we received through E-rate. It's not in the projects and upgrades because this is going to be covered through money that's left over from the override, as well as the remainder of that coming from the Category 2 E-rate reimbursements on the previous 6 schools. So you're looking at about $248,000 plus the $81,000 there. And as I said, we have about $69,000 pulled off to the side for AC units. I know it was mentioned that Charlton Middle School is 1 unit that needs to be replaced. That's actually included in this. So the next one is $53,000 for the replacement switches and additional access points at Shepherd Hill that I spoke about earlier. And then we get to the software licenses. It's listed at about $81,000. It's not included in this budget. The software is still coming out of the school's budgets. This was the first year I was asked to kind of consolidate everything, put into a list where you guys can kind of see, kind of the grand scheme of what it looks like. And obviously, from a purchasing standpoint, if we're looking at 4 buildings using something like Brain Pop or whatnot, we might be able to save a little bit of money if we get, a volume license or whatnot, so we can look at something like that. I really can't tell you anything else about the software, and most of it, like I said, web subscriptions. But I'll get to the list of the software on the next page. District office security access, door access and whatnot. It was an $11,000 project that we're looking at. It would add audio, video capabilities to the doors, as well as the remote ability to unlock the doors from multiple locations throughout the district office. We have a lot of people that come in and, they're waiting at the door and no one's, someone might not be there to open it. And in addition to that, you really couldn't talk to that person outside. So we had that on the list. Unfortunately, we ended up cutting that when we were reducing the budget. And then school requests, the last category. That was originally, this is what the schools have been talking about, with their additional requests for Chrome carts, iPads, smart boards, that kind of stuff. It came in at about $98,000. As part of the reduction, we ended up taking it down to just the replacement items, 10 projectors and a smart board, so it's listed at $8,600. That makes up the final budget proposal, which comes in at about $765,000. Again, with the $118,000 in the lease payment and the $133,000 coming out in E-rate reimbursement. So we reduced the overall budget by approximately $230,000, the overall budget request by approximately $230,000. Below that, you have the previous few years of the technology budget, just for comparison of what we requested and then what was approved in the reimbursements. The next couple of pages kind of have, like I said, a listing of software and devices and whatnot, but does anyone have any questions on the actual budget numbers before we go forward?
Chair, not a question on that, but on your software overview, is there an overview of software for the central office?
No, I was just asked to get the school software.
Okay.
As far as software at the district office, most of the software at the district office, you're talking the financial software, Teach Point. There are a few other applications, there's some applications that we use in the IT department, the help desk and whatnot. Frontline is something that they're looking at, which would be the substitute tracking software and I guess substitute application or scheduling software. That's not included in this budget, but that is something that they're looking at. I can certainly put together a list of items that are used there.
I'm looking to capture that because it has been discussed. I just want to have it in a place that we don't lose track of the conversation on those, please.
And you're looking for just the district office, or do you want any subscriptions
No,
that we
it's
use,
I mean,
or-
it's just there are places that I am sensing that we need to either improve or grow in an area, and it's not in any place that we're
Right.
seeing it, so we can't have it in the back of our minds to be preparing for it.
Right, there is, I mean, there are some things at the district office, I know there's, talk about the financial software.
Mhm.
There are also other items that probably have to be addressed sooner rather than later, which would be things like the, 4 buildings that use the automated logic system.
Mhm.
That's ridiculously old now, software-wise, but unfortunately, that requires a lot of hardware, not tech hardware, but the actual, heating hardware and whatnot. So it ties into all the, the stuff in the classroom and whatnot.
Capital, yeah.
Right, so, but that's becoming a bigger issue because the software itself is just so out of date.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's anything we can do with that. I mean, we can certainly get a hold of them on that, and see if there's any type of option that we can go with, but I'm pretty sure they're kind of tied to what they have for the hardware at this point.
Okay.
But I can add that to the list as well. if you
Yeah,
want.
it's just something I think we should need to be aware of.
Sure.
Thank you.
So the way I listed the software, just, again, the sister schools, so you can kind of see what's being used at both schools. I didn't break it out by cost for each individual item. I just put the total cost that I was given for each school. Hopefully, there'll be some savings by being able to, consolidate a few of these things and whatnot, so. The next page has a district device overview. This is pretty much the same thing that I've included the last couple of years. The difference is we broke out the district devices by school. So you have an idea on the major devices anyways, as to what we have and where we have it throughout the district. The second table is just showing pretty much what we purchased during this fiscal year so far. And the last one is showing them the student device ratios. So the left column is showing the number of students as of February 1st. Second column showing pretty much all student devices. And by student devices, we're only really counting lab computers, netbook and Chromebook carts, and the iPad carts. We're not counting the 215 or so student computers in the classrooms. They're just kind of one here, one there. We're just counting those devices there. It would come in district-wide at basically a 2-to-1 ratio. If you're looking at just the devices you can bring in the classrooms, pretty much eliminating the labs from this equation, it's 2.5 to 1. And then you can see it broken down by the schools. Anyone have any questions on those tables or anything?
It makes it very easy to see too. Thank you.
No problem.
Sure. Just on the software overview, do we buy, I'm noticing that, Charlton L and Mason Road are having the same kind of things, but then we have some differences. And are we buying the IXL at a district level, so we're getting the volume discount?
I believe that's the idea behind this. I mean, right now, the schools are purchasing this stuff themselves, and like I said, most of it's web subscriptions, so there's nothing to install.
Right.
Obviously, if we know what's going on with the, if we have a list, some of these I'm seeing for the first time. Even if something is web-based, we still need to make sure that we have, things whitelisted in firewall so they work correctly. So some of the software I haven't seen before. This way, bring it up here, we can have a list where we can now double-check everything and make sure things are whitelisted correctly. If someone comes to us, or to anybody saying, what are the kids using, what are the software titles, there's one definitive list now. And then on top of that, we're gonna be looking at, grabbing copies of invoices from everybody, all the principals, and then kind of looking at it and seeing, is there a chance of bundling these together and saving a little bit of money?
Yeah.
Usually, you get a district license, district-wide license, it covers 7 schools. They don't usually give you, it's usually either a site license, which would be your school, or a
Right.
district-wide license. If it's something that's per student, then bundling the 2 middle schools together, maybe we can get some savings there. But
Right.
usually, if they're gonna say it's a site one, 1, 2, or 3, it's gonna be the same price. I believe all of these are kind of paid for differently, or they're charged differently. Some are per student, some are per teacher, some are, for the building. They're kind of all over the place, so I'm not gonna say we're gonna save a lot of money, but maybe there's something that we can save by doing that. At very least, we'll have a definitive list of what is being used.
I think that's really important, because you might have a student that comes in, I know we at my school system had a student that came in with some interrupted, like an ELL with some interrupted learning, and we had to go in and grab a district license from like elementary or middle school just to grab that curriculum. And it was good to know what was available.
Right.
So.
How about on the, that next page with the devices, are everyone all set with that? Okay. The last couple of pages, really just showing what we end up using for tracking. So it's kind of showing you a breakdown of the, I guess, computer labs, which could either be a lab or a library. We're not counting the 1 or 2 machines that are just kind of sitting there for resource use or whatnot. We're just counting the ones that are really set up as a lab. So it's showing you there's about 480 computers. It does include the teacher's machine. And then you have the 2 tables on the right. First one is showing the planned replacement. What we've liked to do in the past was go in there and, we put a 5-year warranty on the computers. We always like to replace it after 3 years, keep those machines as current as possible. Those are the ones that are gonna have the software, the heavier hitting software, like the CAD software and whatnot. And that also allows us to now take those machines, put them in the classroom, and there's at least another 18 months to 2 years on the warranty. We haven't been able to do that the last couple of years. This past year, obviously, we just wouldn't have had time with the wiring projects, plus the money going towards the wiring projects. But we're to the point now where if you look at the second table down, now it's off warranty, so now we really have to start to do something about it. They're still gonna go into the classrooms, they're still gonna be used for another probably couple of years. It's just we're on the hook for anything that goes wrong with it right now because they're off warranty. Should be known, obviously, that all of these labs could be used in a pinch for, MCAS or any other assessments. We can deploy the software onto these pretty quickly. I know everyone wants to use the Chromebooks, but in a pinch, we do have these in case we are short, Chromebooks die, whatever it might be. So they can be used for that as well, but for the most part, they're used as, classroom instruction, so. Yeah. The next one's, oops, sorry.
Just to understand this, on the first page of that spreadsheet, where it has a planned purchase date and a planned replacement date, we're showing 2017, 2018. They were not done?
Correct. We would have
Okay.
liked to have replaced them then.
Okay.
They were still under warranty. We just couldn't do it those 2
Okay.
years, for various reasons. So we're at the point now where, we just want to get those replaced. And again, as part of the Windows 10 project, we're going to be using these machines. We can now image these up and take up less of the teacher's time in the classroom because we're walking in with the devices ready to go and swap it out and go rather than spending 3-4 hours in a classroom.
Do you have any of these machines that cannot take Windows 10?
Yeah, the ones that were 8 to 9 years old, I mean, they will run it, but we weren't planning on putting it on there. So we have about 200, I believe it was about 200 machines. We have about 420 roughly that are off warranty right now,
Okay.
not counting the ones that will be off warranty in June. But out of the 420, 200 of those they're ancient. It's time for those to go, so we're not even gonna waste our time with trying to get an image ready for those. Obviously, Windows 7 is on its way out. Next January, they're gonna drop support for it. If we're in a pinch, we can always pay for security updates. We'd rather not do that.
Right.
That being said, I don't believe there's any chance of us hitting 1,200 machines between now and next January. It's just not gonna happen, not with everything else going on. And like I said, we were hoping to be ready to go to start deploying it this past summer. Things that came up last year had us push that. So the next one is pretty much just the same thing, but it's for Chromebooks. It's showing you again just the Chromebook carts, the district issue Chromebook carts. These are the ones that we rely on for MCAS. We're not used for that. They're used for pretty much everything else. This doesn't count the odds and ends. There might be a half a dozen here that someone got from a DCRSD grant or whatnot. I mean, you're looking at 1,380 devices. Again, similar setup where you see that the table on the right showing when it comes off warranty. The one below it is actually showing Google's auto update expiration, which is pretty much an end of life. The next page actually explains, it's right from Google's site, so it kind of explains what will happen there. some of the items or one of the line items that we removed when we were reducing the replacement items were 150 Chromebooks. As you can see in 2018, they're coming off a warranty. We can get by another year. Obviously, if they break, we're on the hook for, paying for replacement parts and whatnot. But once it reaches 2020, you're talking roughly 30% of your fleet reach end of life. When they reach end of life, you really can't rely on them for much of anything. Part of end of life is pretty much you no longer get security updates, you no longer get feature updates. Well, I shouldn't say no longer. They say that it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed you can manage them through the management console. If you can't manage them through the console and you can't get updates, you really can't use them for MCAS. You can continue to use them as long as they work, but as soon as you can no longer manage them, whether there's a replacement waiting for it or not, they're out the door. What we've been doing is taking the old ones we replaced, and we've been using them for various things, whether that's, staff might need one, or maintenance might have a couple of them to walk around and be able to do the heat and AC and whatnot controls. There's some spare ones at Shepherd Hill where they use them as kind of a loaner program. Guidance has some for doing testing. But everyone knows anything goes wrong with them. A key pops off, they're gone. I mean, they've already been replaced once. They're not going to get replaced a second time. They're there until they die. If we have another one waiting, sure, we'll swap it right out. And we should have a lot to be able to keep doing things like that. But you can't rely on those for anything. It's, they work, that's great. But we need to keep the Chromebook cards themselves up to date. And when you hit that end of life, Google, they say it's there's no guarantee, but I think everyone's kind of seen what they've done with Google Chrome and whatnot, where they say in 1 year we're going to remove this feature, and they remove that feature. They don't care who it impacts, and it doesn't matter who you buy this from, which vendor you buy the device from. It's still running Google's operating system. So if they say that they are going to drop support on this day, I'm kind of looking at it like that's the day it's going to happen. It may not happen for another week or 6 months, but I'm not going to, say let's use these devices for MCAS testing, which is as much as I hate to say it, the main reason why they were purchased. We have to keep them up to date. So when you're looking at 2020, you're looking at another 70% of basically 70% of your fleet coming off. Again, whether we have a plan or not. So any questions on the Chromebooks?
I have a question on your Chromebooks. I have a question on, I don't see any iPad information.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. We only have 2 carts, 2 iPad carts.
In the district?
We deployed 2 carts back with the FY18 money, that $457,000. We gave them to the elementary school, so the Charlton Ellen Mason Road. They don't use Chromebooks there, so we gave them those carts. There are approximately, I think it was 420 or so iPads throughout the district. Something like that. 404 iPads throughout the district.
Okay.
They're all over the place. I'd be willing to bet that a third, maybe a quarter of those are old iPad 2s. They're running iOS 9. They're not on the latest. They're 3 versions old in the operating system. Again, when Apple drops support for them, we really have no business kind of keeping them around. You're usually fine for 6 months or whatnot on an older operating system, but once the developers start dropping support, now you have apps, and they could be special ed apps, like the Proloco or something like that, where they just say you need to be on iOS 11. Well, now you can't use it on those devices. Again, that line item, that replacement line item, was established for PCs only, and it wasn't really enough to cover, basically, 1,200 machines over 5 years. Now we have a lot of other devices. If you're looking at that line item at about 220,000, or 216,000, I think it was, we're looking at honestly needing an average of about $400,000 more a year just to replace and maintain all the devices we have. That's varying lengths. I mean, we look at computers and laptops being 5 years, netbooks and Chromebooks 4 years. An iPad, it gets a 1-year warranty on it. So you're looking at about 3 years before they usually drop support for the operating system. That's counting switches, pretty much everything. When you look at it, I came up with a quick 5-year kind of overview, and it came out to an average of about $620 $625,000 just in a line item to maintain what you have. If we add $100,000 worth of additional devices, you're just kind of chasing that line because, we're getting close to being able to, maybe in a couple of years, we have enough to hit that 600,000 or 625,000. But if we keep buying additional devices, we're going to keep chasing that line. Obviously, we need to buy additional devices for certain things. If a new program comes in, like the reading program, and it's decided that it needs, a smart board and a document camera in every room, then we're going to have to look into buying something like that. But, if that comes in again at 100,000, that's got to go in there somewhere. It's going to have to be replaced somewhere. It doesn't matter if it's coming from grants, if it's coming from donations, if it's something that we purchase, no matter where the money came from. Obviously, we're saying we need it, or we think we need it. So that means 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it means we have to replace it. And that's that's where we haven't really been able to do a great job. And obviously, money's a factor. So there are other things that have to be purchased. And I obviously get that. But something like the things that you're required to use now for MCAS and other things, those have to be at the top of the list. So things like the iPads, where we're not using them for any of the assessments, they just kind of, kind of fall by the wayside. Obviously, things that come in through DCF grants and whatnot, where you have maybe 20 devices or whatnot in one classroom, it's great that they got the grant, and I'd like to be able to replace those. And if I, as part of that overall increase in that line item, we would be able to replace those. But if we're only going to get some of that money, if we have to pick and choose, it's probably never going to be the 20 that are in this one classroom that they got on a grant. As much as I hate to say that, but the other 85 classrooms in a building don't have those, so we have to kind of look at what everyone's going to be able to use. An iPad card, I believe, was requested at one of the buildings, one or two. So we ended up having to remove that as part of the reduction there.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
And like I said, that last page is just pretty much explaining, and it's right from Google's website, and it's explaining the auto update expiration. And like I said, you can look at it like an end of life. Down bottom, it's showing the devices that we have in the district right now. The Samsungs were the first round of devices, and they hit their auto update expiration this past July. There are still some out there, maybe about 10 or 12 of them or so. They're not on the carts. They're the ones that people are just kind of using here and there. I haven't heard anything yet that they aren't working, but for all I know, they're not being turned on either because they're just old devices. The Aces were the second round, and the first, the Dell Chromebook 11 was the third round of Chromebooks. Both of those come up and end of life in June of 19. So, just kind of showing you what we have going on there. The 3120s and the 3180s, which are the last two, make up the bulk of your fleet. 30% and about 70% respectively. So, just to kind of give you an idea that, as tough as it is to say, big companies, they don't care if a school district doesn't have the funds to maintain this. They're not going to extend the end of life. They're not going to, it is what it is. I've said it before, if we can't afford to maintain things, we really shouldn't be buying additional things. That being said, there's going to be some exceptions that have to be made, but last year I think that line item was down to $42,000 for the replacement. So it is just not, we need to put something there where we know that there it is. That's what we're hitting all the time. If we buy additional devices, great, but at least we know we're maintaining what we have. So, any other questions, Anna?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the presentation over the last 2 days, and I'd like to just make a couple of final comments, because I know there's a lot to digest that you've heard, and certainly you have that opportunity between now and when we make our final vote on the 27th. But in the section 3, all of the presentations that were made this evening, I think you will probably agree, were thoughtful for new personnel. I thought the explanations certainly substantiate the need for these positions. As I said earlier, I think there's been some collectively some thinking outside the box about how to use resources that we currently have, meaning the financial dollars that are attached to them, maybe a little bit differently. But we still go back to the fact that we're looking at really a request, and we have provided a summary for you that the administrative team has ranked, prioritized, if you will. That was done in looking at really a number of factors and how we ranked them. Some of those included the impact of the recommendation, i.e. the new position, on students. Is this a position that has a greater impact on more students than less? So therefore, we're spending our money a little bit more wisely. Is this what we would call a compliance issue? Is it a requirement that we have to put this position in? Is this an issue that better defines us for providing more equity for students? Is this an issue that is this a recommendation that will expand programs for students? And what is that impact on students? So you've heard all of that as part of that rationale and explanation, and there were other things. However, the bottom line still comes back to is for any new position that we put in, we need to say what comes out. Currently, we have a budget that is close to being balanced, as we said to you. There are assumptions that we have had to make. Should those assumptions shift in any way, it could have a positive or negative effect. There are also unknowns in that budget. We need to and we must fund the first two positions in that priority. We have no choice. At this present point, we have some ability potentially to fund those within a couple of things that have changed that we had not reflected in the budget, but not totally. So as you move forward and look at the rest of the positions, from the nurse on down to the last position that's in the 10th ranking, bear in mind that, again, there isn't a position here that we wouldn't want to put in for next year, that we don't see as a need. In addition, I wanted to point out that in that summary that comes in section 4, which is the reorganization, there are some things that we would be able to do with the SPED reorganization, and I wanted to just reiterate that. By reorganizing the SPED positions for team chairs, it allows us to have a saving substantial enough, at least at this point, our estimation, that we would be able to fund the high school SPED teacher position. So you had heard Mr. Chaplin talk about two positions, and he mentioned that. The job coach, instructional assistant position at the high school, and the BCBA. Without that reorg, those three things are really off the table, and we have to somehow go back to the drawing board. Just simply, our current budget does not provide for sufficient funds at this point to allow us to put in any new positions beyond those first two that are priorities. So as you reflect in the next week or so, and we come back on next Wednesday again, we need to have a serious discussion if between now and then the committee would like us to look at funding any of those positions, because it will take, some work on our part to go back and examine where in the budget or what could we look at, and to come back to you with some potential recommendations. If, however, this evening you have some thoughts about that, it would help us to hear them so that we can have a head start potentially and maybe bring to you next Wednesday some ideas. So I certainly would like to hear from any of you who are the committee as a whole.
If we were to fund all these, do you have the ballpark figure what it would cost? About all these things?
I think it was 700 and,
40,000.
yes,
740.
right.
On the last page.
Oh, last page.
And that, touching on that, have we included the $250,000 reading program?
No.
Okay.
No. These are just positions.
Okay.
Right.
So where is that in your priority? Is that above the positions or below the positions?
The ability to do that may come about,
Okay.
with some funds between now and the end of the school year.
Okay.
So this figure 740 that I just found on the last page, it says total number of positions covered, 6 positions. Is that taken out of the 740, or would you subtract those 6 positions from the 740?
they're talking of the new positions.
Right, you
total.
said
Yeah.
requested 18 positions, 740,000, total number covered by reorganization, 6 positions. So
Yes.
should we take away?
Yes,
So
yes,
that
yeah,
740
right, right.
is too
So
high.
So the total number of new positions overall requested was 18.
Right.
Of those, we can cover 6 that I just mentioned, if you will.
So the 740
And
is,
that includes the, think about, when I say those positions, remember the library assistants, those 2 that we talked about by using the cafeteria money. So we're talking not just about, I think, professional positions, if you will.
so the 740 is too high then, really? We have to take away the 6 positions that are going to be refunded?
Yes, yeah, this is the total
Okay.
for all of these that are
I mean,
listed
how
here.
many,
Yeah.
how much would go down to by then?
It'd have to go back.
Okay, well-
Yeah, yeah.
A couple hundred? Would it be that much? 50 times 6 is 300. if it's-
Yep. I have to go back and.
Okay,
and
but
figure it,
that would be a good figure
Right.
to know for next week,
Yeah.
please.
Mhm.
Thank you. I just want to say before we go any further, this was a wonderful presentation. This book was wonderful. Everything was so well organized. I just want to tell everybody how great it was to follow along. It was so simple. So whoever put this together did a good job.
Anyone else? Want to offer?
I think that is Mr. Chaplin gonna look at some of the things that he spoke of? Were you gonna look at the?
Brings it down to about 495.
195, you got that? Thank you.
Thanks.
So
You
just
you
some
had
500.
mentioned looking at.
You know, when I first started here, I had dark hair and I wasn't going bald.
You didn't have a beard either.
It's white now.
I didn't have grace. It's okay.
What was the question?
Were you gonna go back and look, you had said that you wanted to look at restructuring some of your phys ed and health and,
So, what I said was, the nursing position is the hill I will die on.
right?
And if I have to go back and make a hard decision about cutting something else that exists right now, I will go back and do that if I have to. That's how strongly I feel about it.
Right.
I don't know what that would be. I would have to come back and let you know. This is what I came up with. But I would go and find that $50,000
And I
somewhere.
think when we started the process, a few months back, our hope was, quite frankly, my hope, in talking with Mr. Matthew, that we potentially could get up to 3 new positions out of it, our monies for this year. That just hasn't been the case. And so that's why we initially even thought when we were ranking these that we would be able to cover the nurse, and the other position that was there was the ELL teacher. So we were able to cover those 2. When we discovered that we indeed needed to add some instructional assistants, when we did the careful review again of the instructional assistants under SPED that we had to add those. That became a compliance issue because of IEPs, and therefore it bumped the nurse down. So our intent was hope 2 positions, maybe 3, then it went back to 1, and now we're where we are. So, yeah.
Can I ask, just as the new person, like, when we go back to say, if he wants the nurse, are we asking him to cut it from his budget? Or are we gonna look overall at the district budget and say, you know, maybe there's other things in the district budget that we could reallocate so that we can put more funds in so that he can, so that the, not you personally, so that the high school can have another nurse?
I can answer it in 2 ways. One, primarily since almost 75% of your budget is salary, it's probably going to be a position somewhere.
Right.
You know, when you look at your expense budgets and you look at your other fixed costs, transportation, and those types of things, there's very little other wiggle room for you, unless each building principal, we were to say to them, go back and cut your expense budget by 20 or 30%, so we could add, that is not realistic. So from that perspective, we would have to go back and really look at positions. And I think that's what you're hearing, you know, Mr. Chaplin say, and we have not had that discussion because up to this kind of point in time, to probably a week ago, when we did our final run-through with the building principals on the instructional assistants, we had thought that we could fund that position. And then when we looked at the budget and some other things that had changed, that was not the case. So we can go back and we can revisit, you know, and as Mr. Chaplin said, we can go back and have another discussion to see what impact that would have. What would he look at? What would he recommend to you that he would eliminate as a position? Do understand that with all positions, potentially we talk about position and not people.
Right.
Because there are obviously reduction in force language that would impact professional
And
positions.
I know you don't want to use school choice,
Well, I was
but
just
I
gonna
would
say
say,
Well,
let's take
we
it out
really-
of school choice.
We really
But we have to
can't.
fill it. I mean, I did that with the
Yeah.
librarian, remember,
Yeah.
a couple years ago?
Yeah.
I said, I'll take
Yeah.
10 more.
Yeah.
But if I don't want to, Rich would kill me if I said that.
But I'm saying that.
If you fill them, it's fine.
Well, yeah, you
So
have
you
to fill,
keep-
we didn't
That's
fill
the,
it this
that's the
year.
issue.
Right.
So, you know,
Remember,
But that's what I would do, because what is school choice there? I know we want to save it, but we
We
need to
don't-
use it. We
But
need
if
to
we
use
don't-
it.
we don't have money to use in school choice because you're using it to balance your budget for next year. So
The
it's
whole
not-
thing?
Yeah, if you look at the memo, you're using almost 900,000. So right now, if the numbers that were given this evening are off at all, potentially with the numbers that we reflect, we could have an issue this year. And moving forward, we're trying to get off of the reliance of school choice monies to fund certain things. So our problem right now is we're using it to balance our budget.
The whole amount.
How much are we using?
Well, I'll simply go back to ending balances. We ended FY18 with 319,000, I believe it was. If we indeed have another loss like we did last year of seats unfilled, revenue lost, of, $50,000 to $75,000, we're now down below $225,000 or so. And I think that's too low of a number to have. Certainly, it's the committee's decision, but it would not be my recommendation to simply take it out of school choice. If we could increase the number of slots and we had a reasonable guarantee of filling them, then yes, of course. I try to get as creative as humanly possible in trying to figure out ways to do all of the things that we need to do. But as you can see, from $500,000 of personnel requests that are all valid and justifiable to $400,000 of technology that we're still short, the district just is not being funded at the level it wants to spend at.
So we have about a balance of about 200,000. We've committed next year to the budget 890,000. If we do not meet that quota, we'll have to dip into that 200,000 and use some of that money. Otherwise, we'll need to go back and look at positions to cut. So.
Just a comment, I'm sure Mr. Matthew can add to this.
Thank you.
We're in the early stages of the budget. There is always the hope that as the budget moves
Right.
forward, that revenues are increased through how we are funded for circuit breaker, regional transportation, and then money would open up. And if we pick up the per pupil, they only started at $20. It's historically $25. So as you pick up 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 around there, I think that's the advantage to having this priority sheet, because we know that that's the next position that becomes that priority, is that, because even if the budget hopefully would get solved June or July, if we realize that we're getting that amount of cash back, we can post for that position and hire that position. So I think the way the budget's presented this year actually allows us to have a much clearer pathway, that as the budget cycle moves through, if our numbers change, and hopefully governor's always the most conservative, as it moves forward and we start to see the money, that's where we know we can go.
There are two areas that are still, out there. One is exactly what's going to happen in the state finally. And secondly, remember the unknown list in the memo? Where do those end up? So all of those unknowns that are in that memo, and that's the reason why we brought you that prioritized list, so that should we go forward, and should some of these things end up to be the positive in those areas of unknowns and/or the state, we'll be ready to go, because you will have approved whatever that list looks like finally, and we'll be able to then move forward and get those positions. But, given at this point in time, it's a picture and a snapshot of where we are now. I wish I could tell you and sit here and say, I'm happy to report that we can fund all of these positions, but at this point in time, we can't sit here and tell you to do that. But
I wanted to pursue about the insurance, the 200,000. You said we might save 200,000. When would that be? Like within the next 6 months, a year? Would that come to fruition if it does?
So the discussion about the joint purchase group
Right,
would
yeah.
allow for the opportunity to have a budget savings for fiscal '20. So, as of July 1, within this budget cycle.
So maybe $200,000 more would come in?
Yes, but I will provide an editorial comment if the committee will indulge me. This is a fantastic opportunity to break our reliance on E&D, something else that we didn't touch on today. Because when we talk about, going back and asking building principals to cut their line item budgets by even 10%, well, that's money that's not going to flow back into E&D. And we're going to reach the point someday where we're not going to have a number certified for E&D equal to the amount that we used the previous year.
I'm concerned about this year. And if this is 200,000, we didn't even know was coming until, this was not planned, you just figured this out within like the last month. When did you work on this, like last month or something?
Well, the insurance group's been meeting,
But
and
they
so
finally
when the
came-
numbers were provided, which was the last meeting, I believe.
As the committee is aware, we've been talking about the joint purchase group
Right,
for
I
a
know, but I
while.
didn't realize until last night that you got it.
It was only, the
Right.
final agreement and the rates were only presented in the last couple of weeks.
So I know we should think of the reserves in the future, but I'm concerned about next year. And I think that nurse is critical. It helps mental health. It's more than just medical. It's everything about the kid. And if the Mr. Chaplin says it,
Let us go back and do a couple of things. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to ask if you have some other positions that you see right now that you would like to tell us, those are critical. Let us go back and have some conversations about how we may be able to fund those. Maybe not even touching that, and come back to you. Certainly the conversation that Mr. Chaplin and I started when we had the conversation, I said, well, the nurse now is not second on this list. We've had to bump it down because of the IAs. That was just, this past week, and we had prepared this document for you. But we can go back and see if it makes sense for him to look at something internally, or whether there's some other place in the budget that we could recommend. I think, as you know, we've made some assumptions in this budget. One of those assumptions, for example, has to do with moving the STEAM director's salary out of school choice. The committee could make some other decisions, but we just want to say that, again, it kicks the can down the road. But it is ultimately your decision, but we wanted you to have all of the information to be able to make that decision. So whether you say we want to use that insurance money or put the salary back in and let's kick the can down the road, that's really
That's what
your
I'm thinking,
decision.
That's what I think.
That's your decision, but do understand, what we're saying is the heavy reliance on those two areas, E&D and school choice, to balance your budget will continue to be there, and we're trying to, put a fiscal health plan, like a capital plan in place that's multi-year. Yeah.
Just through the chair, my concern, well, I consider the budget, for the most part, is as thoughtfully as it's been presented as the first pass. So based on this, if our principals have an ability to go back and look for something, if everybody came up with something, maybe in Mr. Chaplin's case, there is another direction for him to go in for this position he feels so strongly about. But my concern with not rebuilding E&D and having that fund in a healthy state, that is the place that we should be going for capital issues when they happen. And I think all the principals have very clearly communicated the needs of their buildings that are extensive. Any one of those situations could be a large number that would take whatever E&D money that we have available. So to not respect that process and Mr. Matthews' recommendation to rebuild that, I think is jeopardizing, where we could be standing, because we did have that hit this spring, and it wasn't an extensive hit, but it was $160,000 in the springtime, which you can't create that kind of money at the end of the school year. We need to be able to have that. I'm just concerned with our building needs alone, that we don't have this source that we're supposed to have to go back for that. We've been using it for our operational budget. We don't have that money there to handle our capital needs, and we are going to have a long process ahead of us for doing the work that needs to be done in our building, when the capital plan, the study, all of that is going to be years out before we, correct some of these major issues. So that's just my feeling, that we have to really respect that concern about the E&D.
I have one other question, just in bookkeeping. You know that list you always give us of, like, revenue, so much from E&D and so on?
Right.
We don't have this in here yet, do
No,
we?
it'll be in your school committee
But
packet.
so we've got it
That's
before.
what I-
Okay, I was looking for it, I couldn't
Before,
find
way
it.
before
Yeah.
the 27th.
Yes, you'll have it for
You'll
this
have
coming
for- you'll have it tomorrow.
13.
Good.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Because that's
Print it out.
beneficial.
Could we possibly have it printed out for like when we meet, just so that we have it on Monday, so we have a chance to look at it before the 13th?
Yep.
Thank you.
If you want to come in and grab it tomorrow afternoon,
We're
or
gonna
do
be
you
here
want to just
Monday and
send
Tuesday
it?
and Wednesday.
We'll just bring it to
Yeah, we can
till-
bring it,
we'll bring it to one of the meetings.
Yeah.
to your interviews on Monday.
And Sandy, do you have the resumes, or do you want us to pick them up? They're being, okay, so they're ready, we can get them on the way out, okay. So we're all set? Anything else, Dr. Nash?
They're in the Dropbox.
No, I'm set.
Okay,
No, that was just a summary of them, that wasn't a resume. You know, the thing you gave us the first night with our names on it, the 4 names. And it was like just a little bit of stuff. This is
Yeah, no,
what-
it was just the letter and, yeah, no, it wasn't the full resume.
yeah, and we didn't have the full resumes, they were
Oh, so
just
we took a snapshot.
abbreviated. So we should have the whole packet, but she did give it in the that link, the Dropbox.
Yeah, just print it at home. I think that's it.
Yeah. But she's all set. You'll be able to pick them up on the way out, and you'll have the full packet to look over for Monday. So on Monday, February 11th, the meeting will start at 5, because we did post it for 5. And it's optional if you want to come at 4:45. I'm always here half hour early anyway, so whoever wants to come, if you have any questions, it's optional for you to come earlier. And I will send you the questions, okay? You'll get them this weekend. I'll email everyone the questions.
You going to tell which person is coming for the public? Do you have the names, like who's at 5? Should we make that public tonight?
Yeah, I've got the names here, I think. Let's see. Yeah, I do. Okay, on Monday, Stephen Lamash, and he will be here on Monday for the interview, 5 to 6. And Dr. Michael Whaley will be here on Monday, also 6:30 to 7:30. And then on Tuesday, it'll be Jennifer Haggerty, and she'll be here 5 to 6. And then it's Dr. Julia Carlson, and she'll be here 6:30 to 7:30. Okay? And our next meeting dates will be Wednesday, February 13th, and that's at Shepherd Hill. It'll be at 7 p.m. And Wednesday, February 27th, will be at the Charlton Middle School at 6 p.m. And I did call Mary, and she is able to make 6 o'clock.
Okay.
So-
I'm not gonna be able to.
Oh, no?
That's the 27th, right?
Yes. Remember yesterday, I
yeah,
said I would
yeah.
call because everybody had agreed, but,
It's dependent on whether or not my husband is traveling or not.
okay.
So I won't know until close, so.
We should do
Start
the
with budget, and I'll
right,
catch
so
up
they
with
do
you
the
at
budget
7
first.
o'clock.
Okay. And I did give the interview dates. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? We're adjourned.